Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable, see playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 3261, Starlight Witness. Hancock and the other members of the Bering race were frozen in shock upon hearing the Sun Crow's answer to Zen's order. Did they hear correctly? Were these Sun Crows fake? Were they merely disguised by humans who wore feathered wings on their backs? It was all extremely confusing. However, the auras Micah, Bagot, and Elizabeth exuded shattered all their speculations. These people were all genuine members of the Sun Crow race. There was no doubt about it. Micah, you, Bagot, we've met each other before. Quote. Hancock and the others continued to plead for their lives, but the Sun Crows turned a deaf ear to their cries. How could the Bering race hold on to their hopes when things had come to this? There's no way we can win this right now. We're outnumbered. Retreat. Run. It was all in vain. Just as they were about to escape using the grand teleportation technique, a pale, white light flashed over the Oneness Mountain. The cage of heaven and earth worked. Their only road out was now blocked. No, why can't we leave? Block their attacks. Retreat. Retreat. Hancock was declared leader upon Ware's death, but he failed to live up to the title. Though the Bering race stood calm when bullying Flamen and others earlier, they were an utter mess when facing against these masters of the Oneness Sky Palace and the Sun Crow race. In the air, all kinds of powerful energy constantly surged. Despite its big size, the Oneness Mountain shook and trembled underneath their feet due to the attacks. Flamen descended from the sky. Her chest had been stabbed through and blood burst out from her body like a fountain, but she just flew downwards as if she didn't feel any pain from her wound. It was far beyond Elvinia's cultivation level to take that blow. As Elvinia fell down from the air, Lavender, Laquisha, and Nellie immediately surrounded her. She didn't seem to be seriously injured, but she was unconscious and that scared them. Flamen reached out and gently scratched Elvinia's arm, leaving a small scar on Elvinia's skin. She frowned and pressed her hand on Elvinia's forehead, looking gloomier. Lady Flamen, is she all right? Nellie asked, her face marred with worry. To their dismay, Flamen shook her head. Elvinia's body was able to withstand the blow. However, her soul was an entirely different matter. It seemed to have been severely injured from the vibrations. Flamen knew her soul had reached its limit, but she still squeezed out her own soul of light in order to activate a secret soul technique that might nourish Elvinia's soul. As Flamen did so, the three women took this chance to observe the sky. They were grateful to see Zen return safely. However, the sight of him ordering the masters of the Sun Crow race made them all gasp. They absolutely believed in Zen's talent, but there was no way he could order around all those powerful Sun Crow warriors, right? Their auras were in no way inferior to Flamen's. It was impossible, or was it? I thought I stood a chance to catch up with him in the Phoenix Palace, Nellie said, but she shook her head and smiled at the realization that she overestimated herself. I never think that way, Lavender said, knowing well just how talented Zen was. Among the three of them, Lavender had been the one by his side the longest. She, of all people, knew of his rapid growth. Logically speaking, the longer one cultivated, the more difficult it would be to progress. Zen, ever the enigma, just chose to progress with his growth faster. As the Sun Crow race took the lead in launching their attack, Pearson Auden also led the masters of the Oneness Sky Palace to make a move. Whether it was by numbers or sheer power, the Bering race was at an absolute disadvantage. However, the 7 warriors from the Black Jade clan still showed their high combat effectiveness. Their other shore tokens appeared as white porcelain fragments above their heads that could form a sort of unique shield when combined. This shield of thick porcelain could serve as protection for the Bering race and help them out of their situation. So even if the fight had been going on for 5 minutes, only 5 members of the Bering race were killed. The shield, however, wasn't indestructible. It could delay immediate death and give the Bering race some time, but it was bound to give up at some point. There was no way it could block the combined force of the Sun Crow race and the Oneness Sky Palace forever. So long as the cage of heaven and earth remained working, then the Bering race was doomed to die here. Despair filled Hancock and his warriors at their hopeless situation. Meanwhile, something else was also happening in the northwest of the Bloom Divine Province. The Oneness Guards and the other Shore Realm warriors had chosen to stay in Tiger Peace City to await further instructions. They were quite relaxed since the rest of the battle had nothing to do with them. They could contentedly lay back in comfort and safety despite having narrowly escaped death not too long ago. How dare the Bering race attack the Oneness Mountain? Since Master Pierce has led the troops to go back, they will surely die miserably. I hope the Oneness Sky Palace can survive this calamity safely. Just as they discussed this, numerous strange squares began to appear above the Tiger Peace City. These squares emitted a dazzling blue light that immediately attracted everyone's attention. After a short while, the squares morphed and materialized into the shape of a young man with wings. His features slowly solidified and everyone saw that he had fine eyebrows, slender eyes, and an air of delicate beauty. He was none other than Emperor Charm. He merely glanced at the people below. Tens of thousands of soldiers, including the Oneness Guards and the warriors at the other shore realm, could only stand frozen in place by his sudden appearance. Each one of them was nothing more than dust and insignificant ants in front of this powerful emperor. This was Emperor Charm's strength. He didn't need to make his identity known nor release any special aura. All he needed to do was to look at those below him and they would freeze. He eventually withdrew his gaze to stretch out his white palm wherein a small cube appeared. There was a world within that cube and the scene within it revealed the fighting that went on in the Phoenix Palace. His royal guards were currently killing the members of the Bering race alongside the Oneness Sky Palace. His face revealed a puzzled expression. Elizabeth, Micah, Bagot, why did you betray me? He wasn't angry. Truth be told, he felt more confused than angry. With the support of the bloodline worship, Emperor Charm was certain of Elizabeth's and Micah's absolute loyalty. There was no way they would ever betray him. There was definitely something more to this. This entire situation was confusing to him, including the fact that Zen had shot down his sons. Now that he personally came here to the Bloom Divine Province, he expected the truth to be revealed soon enough. As he held his square world on one hand, he summoned another shore token in the other. It was an azure spear, translucent from tip to body like crystal ice. This was his Starlight Tracking Spear, a unique other shore token he dug out from stage 33. Starlight Witness, Emperor Charm said. A few dots of starlight flashed above the Bloom Divine Province despite it being daytime. These dots of starlight promptly shot down and appeared above the heads of leaders of the Bright Mountain, the Ivory Mountain, the Azure Mountain, and the Golden Mountain. Chapter 3262, Wantonly Killing. Bright, twinkling stars floated above the four mountain leaders' heads, and they couldn't help but look at them in astonishment. What are these stars? They seem to come from some other shore token. I can feel their aura. Why is another shore token here? While the four mountain leaders were quite confused, Elizabeth, Micah, and Bagot all gazed at the stars with shock. It's the Starlight Witness, Elizabeth whispered. A warrior like Emperor Charm didn't usually engage in battles even once for tens of thousands of years. That was why nobody knew about his Starlight Tracking Spear, although he had owned it for thousands of years already. Only the closest people to him knew about it, such as Elizabeth. Thus, they knew that Emperor Charm had already arrived in the Bloom Divine Province when the starlight appeared. After a while of being amazed at the starlight, the four mountain leaders quickly became cautious. They were all old warriors that had lived for many years, so their innate fighting instincts told them that those stars weren't as simple as they seemed. Furthermore, lots of other shore tokens had strange abilities, and any negligence on their part might lead to their doom. No matter what they are, do protect yourselves. The leader of the Azure Mountain declared as he beat his chest hard. Swoosh! A flurry of thunderstorms materialized and enveloped him entirely. The thunderstorms spread to a radius of 1,000 feet around him and formed an absolute energy zone. It destroyed anything that passed through its area. The leader of the Ivory Mountain brandished his sword, and then sword shadows appeared continuously. Countless sword shadows grew rapidly like weeds and tightly wrapped around him. The leaders of the Bright Mountain and the Golden Mountain also followed suit and used their own methods to protect themselves. Because of the starlight, the masters who had been chasing the Bering race stopped for the time being. The members of the Bering race temporarily had a chance to breathe, but they were confused. They didn't know why the Oneness Sky Palace suddenly stopped. Buzz! Just then, a square-shaped object appeared in the sky. Something had crossed the space and moved above the Oneness Mountain. The Oneness Mountain had already been covered by the cage of heaven and earth. Even powerful masters like Auden and Micah couldn't use the grand teleportation. After all, there weren't many people in the world who could completely ignore the cage of heaven and earth. Buzz! The square shook as a blurry dark figure appeared. The figure looked like it had a pair of wings that were several hundred feet wide, and an azure spear. Whoosh! Just as the figure came into view, it also instantly disappeared. Crack! The next moment, everyone saw that the blurry figure had rushed towards the leader of the Azure Mountain. Alas, his thunderstorms that could tear anything apart couldn't do anything to stop it. At that moment, the leader of the Azure Mountain felt an extremely powerful aura, and instinctively thought that he would die. Puff! The azure spear pierced through his body. When the tip of the spear penetrated his body, he only felt that it took away everything he had. His strength, soul, consciousness, will, and spirit no longer belonged to him. The azure spear didn't stop after it pierced through the leader of the Azure Mountain. Before the blurry figure pulled out the tip of the spear from his body, it weirdly disappeared. Then, it stabbed the body of the Ivory Mountain's leader next. Puff! It penetrated, disappeared, and appeared. In the next second, the spear skewered the leader of the Golden Mountain. The 4 leaders died in succession. However, none of the dead leaders nor the others noticed the order of killing. They only saw 4 azure spear lights flash and pierce through the bodies of the 4 leaders at the same time. After the 4 leaders had died, the figure with huge wings appeared again. Only then did they see its face. It was Emperor Charm of the Sun Crow race. Hancock and his companions cried out desperately as they ran for their lives. When they finally saw Emperor Charm, they felt a glimmer of hope amidst a crisis. Emperor Charm of the Sun Crow race is here in person. Thank heavens, we're finally saved. Of course, the people of the Oneness Sky Palace were worried and in a state of panic. There was no one who could fight Emperor Charm except for Yasmin and Eastern Emperor Tai. If they were well prepared, the leaders of the 6 mountains might be able to fight him. Yet, Emperor Charm acted quickly and swiftly killed the leaders of 4 mountains just now. Although there were many powerful warriors present, who could fight him head-on? Meanwhile, Emperor Charm floated in the air. As he slowly spread out his wings, a golden disc shadow appeared behind him. It was the faith object of the Sun Crow race, the Sun Totem. Buzz! All the members of the Sun Crow race knelt when the Sun Totem came to light. It was their rule that had existed for countless years, and they couldn't disobey it. The members of the Sun Crow race, such as Elizabeth, Micah, and Bagot, also felt their legs tremble and were about to bend down when they saw the golden sun shadow. But their instincts restricted them. All of the people of the Sun Crow race suffered. Their bodies convulsed as their instincts fought with their limbs. In the end, they didn't kneel. Their instincts had gained the upper hand. Disappointment was written all over Emperor Charm's face when he saw Elizabeth, Micah, and the rest of them float in the air motionlessly. Micah, Bagot, and the other members of the Sun Crow race were silent. They didn't betray Emperor Charm, but the one in front of them. When Emperor Charm received no answers, he didn't force them. He raised his azure spear horizontally, and starlight spread throughout the sky once again. Buzz, buzz, buzz. This time, 7 rays of starlight appeared above the heads of the 7 powerful warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace. The people of the Oneness Sky Palace were still not over the deaths of the 4 mountain leaders. Naturally, they clearly knew that the starlight above their heads would kill them. Whoosh! When a member of the Ivory Mountain saw the starlight above his head, his face paled, and he impulsively ran away. The other 6 did the same. They either used a secret technique to strengthen themselves or chose to escape. While they were fleeing, Emperor Charm raised the heavy azure spear in his hand. Puff, puff, puff. Everyone saw the spear stab all 7 of them at the same time. Such a killing method was powerful and overbearing, almost irresistible. The people of the Oneness Sky Palace felt desolate. They were like a group of helpless lambs, unable to do anything to Emperor Charm. Emperor Charm, who had killed the 7 people, flew back up the sky once again. He held his azure spear indifferently and chose his next target. Chapter 3263, Fight Back. In general, these warriors were powerful enough to dominate any province in the Source World. However, their lives were in Emperor Charm's hands. Buzz! Another starlight descended and landed above the head of a bald man. The bald man was called Norbert Chen, a close friend of the Ivory Mountain's leader. His eyes were still bloodshot as he hadn't recovered from having watched Emperor Charm kill the mountain leader. Now that the starlight fell above his head, the veins in his temples popped out and he roared, "This winged demon is attacking our Oneness Sky Palace. I will try my best to fight him." Whoosh! Then, he stomped his feet in the air, which distorted the space beneath him. His other sure token appeared on his right hand. It was a tiger-shaped gauntlet. Buzz! He rushed towards Emperor Charm as the tiger's eyes on his gauntlet turned red, and an immense power gathered within it. His other shore token was of strengthening type, which came from stage 32 of the other shore. However, he had more than one other shore token. Aside from his tiger-shaped gauntlet, he also had another other shore token in the form of a palm-sized wooden compass. He released the compass, and its needle began to spin like mad. Crack, crack, crack. In turn, Emperor Charm arched his brows at the sight of the compass. Norbert Chen's tiger-shaped gauntlet was an ordinary other shore token. Although it came from stage 32 of the other shore, it could only release a power of 50,000 divine megatons. On the other hand, the wooden compass was much more powerful. It was made of withered wood. 3 compasses were discovered in stage 32 of the other shore, but nobody knew who made them. Someone had guessed that the instant civilization had deliberately left the compasses behind as a malicious joke for the next generations. The compass had 3 scales, and the first scale read, 1. If the compass needle was pointed to 1, the power the owner released wouldn't change at all. The second scale was 0. If the needle was pointed to 0, the power would return to 0, no matter how strong it was. The third scale was 300. If the compass needle was turned to 300, the power the owner exerted would be multiplied by 300 times. In other words, Norbert Chen could unleash a terrifying power of 3 million divine megatons if he used the power of 10,000 divine megatons together with the compass. 3 million divine megatons. Not even the supreme masters in the source world or the chaos ancient gods could withstand such a blow. If there were no other restrictions on the compass, it would probably be the strongest other shore token in stage 32 of the other shore. Although there was only a 1/3 probability of the needle pointing to 300, such a force was enough to kill the opponent in an instant. However, the compass itself was not a descending type of other shore token. It meant that the physical body that released the power had to bear all the power first. In theory, it might be great to increase one's strength by 300 times, but in reality, that amount of power could cause the owner's physical body to collapse. Despite that, there was still a way to release a certain part of the power even if the physical body collapsed. Someone had tried it before Norbert Chen. There was a time when the leader of the mountain monkey race in the source world had carried this compass. The mountain monkey race was a small race, located beside the separate abyss race. The separate abyss race had oppressed them for generations. During one battle, the leader of the mountain monkey race finally made use of this compass. At the same time, he employed another other shore token, the paramount sky bead. His body collapsed after he had used such an uncontrollable force, but the paramount sky bead flew straight and smashed the leader of the separate abyss race to death. It was safe to say that it was a compelling other shore token. The separate abyss race had destroyed the mountain monkey race later on, but they had fought to the death until the end. Therefore, the powerful masters of the source world also knew what the compass was for. It was used for desperate moments in battle. Strength. Gather. Norbert Chen roared. The tiger-shaped gauntlet on his hand continuously released surging amounts of power. Crack, 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 crack. After a while, the compass finally stopped. The needle on the compass slid past 0, past 1, and finally stopped at the scale of 300. Swoosh. Under the influence of the compass, the power in the tiger-shaped gauntlet quickly increased. The tiger-shaped gauntlet's strength had originally reached 60,000 divine megatons, but after it multiplied 300, it reached up to 18 million divine megatons. Crack, crack, crack. The power's immense pressure even caused the space locked up in the cage of heaven and earth to collapse. Norbert Chen was filled with grief when he saw that the mountain leader was dead. Now that he had chosen to fight desperately, how could he even hesitate? Sky-splitting attack. Go to perdition, he shouted. Just as he uttered those words, he had already erupted 18 million divine megatons of force. Even the chaotic source spirits that he had nurtured for many years immediately dimmed and became exhausted. Yet, his attack also burst along the tiger-shaped gauntlet at the same time. Boom! A tiger-shaped fist shadow suddenly came out of his right hand and sent out a violent punch. His current choice was more tragic and terrifying than burning the other shore token. It was a much fiercer desperate battle. The punch was so strong that its impact shook the entire Oneness Mountain. The tremors were felt even in the mountain far away, where the disciples of the three-sword sects felt their legs weaken as they sat on the ground. Lastly, the tiger-shaped fist tore up everything in its way and rushed towards Emperor Charm at top speed. The power of this punch is enough to kill Emperor Charm, isn't it? Truly, Norbert Chen is not famous in the Ivory Mountain, but he could still launch such a powerful attack before his death. Millions of divine megatons of power. That other shore token is really amazing. Although the power was terrifying, Emperor Charm still had an indifferent expression on his face. No matter how powerful his strength is, it is useless if he fails to hit the target. Just as the tiger-shaped fist shadow approached Emperor Charm's body once again turned into fist-sized squares. The Sun Crow race was good at flames and space. This destructive punch was indeed unable to hit Emperor Charm. But just as Emperor Charm was about to leave, two more people appeared not far away from him. One of them grabbed a leaf. That leaf turned out to be the Grand Hidden Leaf. Under the leaf's cover, even a powerful and agile man like Emperor Charm didn't notice that the two of them had approached him. The other man had a small black snake in his hand. The little snake was a creature from stage 31 of the other shore. The man and the snake had been together for so many years, and they shared a very deep relationship. He had even found a woman's body for the black snake, taught her to read and speak, and even married her. At this moment of life and death, he and the little snake chose to fight until their end. Splash! The little snake's whole body burned hotly, and then it quickly bit Emperor Charm. Emperor Charm had planned to use the space thurgy to leave, but the little snake bit him, and the bite paralyzed his body. The space thurgy didn't work anymore, and the blue squares disappeared one by one. Almost all the powerful warriors at present were top masters who had crossed stage 32 of the other shore. Thus, how could he kill them all at will? Chapter 3264, Duplicating Gemstone. The tiger-shaped fist shadow zoomed and quickly rushed towards Emperor Charm. Because of the immense force, the surrounding space was constantly twisted and broken, forming a curved bubble. As the bubble approached quickly, a worried expression finally took form in Emperor Charm's face. He squinted his eyes and clenched his fists, as if anticipating the incoming danger. He knew if this punch hit him, he would surely be smashed to pieces. The light in his eyes flickered and he tried to forcibly teleport away. However, those small squares disappeared as soon as they appeared. After being bitten by the black snake, he had lost the ability to escape. This was how the battle between the strong was like. No matter how powerful a warrior was in the source world, they would still have setbacks if they were to encounter some special abilities. And indeed, Emperor Charm was in the middle of this situation. If the heart of accomplice hadn't been used to kill where before, Emperor Charm would have been dead by now. In the same way, Emperor Charm's starlight tracking spear was also a very special killing weapon. This spear could only kill the people who were targeted by the Starlight Witness, and anyone who was targeted would be killed in one strike. That was how the Starlight Tracking Spear had directly killed the leaders of the several mountains before they could even react. But now, ironically, Emperor Charm was facing the same problem. The two warriors from the Ivory Mountain got close to him in a strange way, as if sneaking up to him. And then, one of them used the little black snake to bite him. Emperor Charm couldn't figure out the ability of the little black snake, so he couldn't break free from it. In addition to his already difficult and painful situation, with the powerful punch from Norbert, he was bound to die. Pierce, Auden and the others of the Oneness Sky Palace looked expectant. Of course, it would be great if Emperor Charm would be killed by this blow. A smirk was visible on their faces and their eyes were gleaming and hopeful. A trace of anxiety appeared on Emperor Charm's face. As he gritted his teeth, a small gemstone suddenly appeared from the spot between his eyebrows. This gemstone was also another shore token. After it appeared, it shot upwards. Just after the small gemstone left him, the tiger-shaped fist shadow had already approached him and hit his body head-on. Crack, crack, crack. The 18 million divine megatons of force was by no means something a physical body could resist. Under the gaze of everyone around, Emperor Charm turned into a cloud of dust and quickly dissipated. The tiger-shaped fist shadow continued to fluctuate diagonally upwards, shooting into the distance. There were gasps and sighs of relief. He made it. Emperor Charm just got killed. It's unbelievable. A trace of joy appeared on the faces of the people from the Oneness Sky Palace. The scene they had witnessed before their own eyes was beyond their imaginations. It was simply unbelievable. Regardless, the people felt as though a burden had been lifted from their shoulders. The members of the Sun Crow race, however, were silent. In their consciousness, the death of Emperor Charm was the biggest grief to them. Those members of the Bearing race all paled. They had been hoping for Emperor Charm to help them out. Who would have thought that the powerful Emperor Charm would be smashed into pieces by one punch? However, most of them had missed the gemstone that was flying in the air. After the gemstone flew away in a distance, it suddenly emitted a green light. The green light quickly became intense, and Emperor Charm, who had already been turned to dust, once again was reborn from the green light. The joy on the faces of the warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace was unmistakable. This happiness, however, only lasted for a few seconds before their expressions turned into astounded looks. Zen, who was watching the scene from below, also had a puzzled expression in his eyes. He couldn't comprehend what had just happened. It's so strange. Emperor Charm should already have been killed. The scene just now was definitely not an illusion. The tiger-shaped fist shadow clearly had smashed Emperor Charm into smithereens like crushing dry weeds. Those who have entered stage 33 naturally have a couple of tricks up their sleeves to save their lives. That duplicating gemstone is not rare in the heavenly treasure cave. It can perfectly duplicate oneself after being carried. It is equivalent to gaining an extra life, explained Hui. Duplicating gemstone, perfectly duplicate oneself. Zen was stunned and confused. Then if one gets a few more of the duplicating gemstones, won't that make them immortal? This was something new to Zen, the ability to perfectly copy oneself. Such other shore tokens were simply too powerful, and according to Hui, there seemed to be a great number of them. Everyone can only carry one of such gemstone. If it is used, then you will not be qualified to carry a second one, Emperor Charm in his mind added concisely. Such a treasure was precious, but everyone only had one chance to use it. Emperor Charm had relied on the duplicating gemstone to avoid the calamity of death, and in this case, he had already used his one chance with the precious gemstone. He looked down at the people below him angrily, the muscles on his face stiff. If it weren't for my special trick, I would have been killed by you on the spot today. Buzz. The starlight tracking spear in his hand shook again. It made an eerie buzzing sound, and then 6 rays of starlight descended. Norbert had collapsed and died because he had unleashed a too great power. The warrior who had taken out the little black snake was also burned to death together with the snake itself. This was a result of burning his other shore token. Only the warrior who provided the grand hidden leaf was still alive, and one of the 6 rays of starlight fell directly above that person's head. When the man saw the starlight witness above his head, all his blood left his face and he was dead pale. Out of instinct to escape, he swiftly raised the grand hidden leaf. His aura was completely hidden, and he disappeared. However, the starlight witness followed him like a shadow. No matter which direction that invisible person moved to, the starlight witness also moved and followed. He would never be able to escape. Since you have offended me, you must be prepared to die, Emperor Charm said as he shook the starlight tracking spear. His tone was fierce and his eyes were sharp as blade. Puff, 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 puff. At the same time, 6 avatars of Emperor Charm appeared behind the 6 powerful warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace. Then, 6 rays of spear radiance pierced through them. After killing the 6 people, Emperor Charm returned to his original position. It took a while before he was able to calm down, and when he finally did, his face became cold and arrogant again. His eyes swept over the people below him slowly, as if he were meticulously judging each person. He was choosing a new target. When his eyes swept over Zen, he paused for a moment. It was this guy who had shot down his sons. It had cost him a lot of energy to use the 9 Sun World Destruction Theurgy. If it weren't for the fact that he needed to help Divine Farmer and Yellow Thirk, he wouldn't have used the 9 Sun World Destruction Theurgy, nor would he encounter such a strange thing. However, Zen had successfully aroused his interest. Emperor Charm gave out a small smile and felt a bit excited. Of course, he didn't want to kill Zen this easily. On the one hand, he wanted to know what Zen had relied on to shoot down his sons. On the other hand, the group of golden red chaotic source spirits was still in Zen's hands. Just as Emperor Charm was choosing the next group of targets to kill, Pierce moved his lips slightly and began to communicate with the powerful warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace through life vitality. Although Emperor Charm was undeniably powerful, he had his own weakness. Moreover, it was impossible, and of course, illogical for these people from the Oneness Sky Palace to wait to be slaughtered like lambs. After a short discussion, Pierce's face suddenly looked determined. His expression was hard and his eyes were serious and sharp. He suddenly flew at Emperor Charm, who was up in the air. Whoosh! The air blew as Pierce's body ascended. Led by Pierce, the other powerful warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace also flew following him. If it was only 1 or 2 powerful warriors that came to fight him, Emperor Charm would not be afraid. But now that most of the people were rushing towards him, he naturally needed to act with caution. A desperate struggle, disdain appeared on Emperor Charm's face. Just as he was about to fight them, the members of the Sun Crow race also came flying straight for him. Zen couldn't bear to see the strong warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace face Emperor Charm alone, so he gave the order to the members of the Sun Crow race to attack him together. Chapter 3265, Solution. As Pierce rushed at Emperor Charm, he ordered his men to remove the cage of heaven and earth. The cage was only capable of trapping the members of the bearing race, and would be ineffective against Emperor Charm. In fact, it restricted the activities of their own people. It was Pierce's first encounter with the Starlight Tracking Spear, and although he did not know its origin, he kept guessing at it. No matter how powerful another shore token was, there was always a way to destroy it. The Starlight Tracking Spear was no doubt intimidating, but there should be some rules contained within it. If he could figure out the rules, he could definitely break the spear. Judging by the way Emperor Charm used it, it seemed he could only attack those whose heads were covered by the starlight. So if one could avoid the starlight, one would avoid Emperor Charm's attack too. Buzz. With the sudden tremor of the space, the cage of heaven and earth was removed. Pierce was well prepared, disappearing the second the cage was lifted. He then reappeared behind Emperor Charm, faster than the eye could see. Emperor Charm hadn't expected the cage to be removed so suddenly. He was even more surprised at Pierce's bold head-on attack. He had forgotten that the powerful warriors following Eastern Emperor Tai were hardened from hundreds of battles. The fear of death didn't even make them flinch. Equinox flower, bloom. A huge red flower emerged above Pierce's head in full bloom, shimmering beautifully. Emperor Charm, this is where you'll stay for the time being, Pierce said as a space illusion enveloped Emperor Charm, trapping him inside. Playing a trick of space on Emperor Charm was like juggling before a king. He had little difficulty avoiding the cage of heaven and earth, so this illusory space he was now in wouldn't be tough to handle. Small squares appeared on the surface of his body, and he quickly shuttled through the illusory space. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. There were lights and shadows of different colors all over. Red, white, black, yellow, green, blue and purple were spread throughout as if countless dye tanks had burst and spilled into space. He traveled through but could not find a way out. The powerful warriors in the sky gathered around Pierce when Emperor Charm had been trapped. They could not see Emperor Charm from the outside of the Equinox flower. The Equinox flower was capable of creating a truly strange space, formed of many layers upon layers that locked him in. This was what made it difficult for even a powerful warrior like Emperor Charm to speedily find an escape. But even if he couldn't find a way out now, it certainly did not mean he would never find one. I can't hold him in for too long, Pierce said in a low voice, deep in focus. Only working together will allow us to deal with him effectively. Defeating a powerful warrior like Emperor Charm would prove difficult in a head-on fight. However, all of the powerful warriors present had merged with unique other shore tokens. If they could make good use of their other shore tokens' abilities and rely on their mechanisms, they might stand a chance. His speed is too fast. There is almost no way to grab hold of him. When he gets out of Elder Pierce's illusory space, we will not be able to catch him, said a warrior from the Bright Mountain worriedly. As he finished speaking, Felicity of the Origin Mountain gently waved her hand, and a small cross arrow appeared in her palm. I have another shore token. Although it can't capture Emperor Charm, it's enough to hold him down in a certain spot. When Auden saw the cross arrow, his eyes gleamed. That is the heavenly immobilizing marker. Felicity nodded. Anyone targeted by the heavenly immobilizing marker would be pulled back to their original position no matter how far away they had gotten, as long as the owner held the thought in their mind. As another shore token of stage 32, the other shore power it could unleash was only dozens of divine megatons. Because of this, once anyone was located by the heavenly immobilizing marker, there was absolutely no possibility of getting rid of it. That makes it a lot easier. When Emperor Charm escapes from the Equinox flower, he will definitely attempt to teleport away. That's when Felicity can use her other shore token to pull him back. Another middle-aged man suggested. As he spoke, he took out another shore token as well. It was a huge bone stick, also dug out from one of the upper stages on the other shore. As another shore token of strengthening type, the bone stick could unleash an astonishing power. Beside the middle-aged man was an old man who held a mirror. When the middle-aged man looked into the mirror, there soon appeared his reflection, who also held a bone stick in his hand and looked powerful and majestic. The warriors readied themselves to launch the fatal blow once Emperor Charm escaped the illusory space. Pierce grew more and more cautious as he stared the Equinox flower before him. He seems to have found the flaw and is breaking through. The layers of space were like the layers of petals on a rose, tightly wrapped around the real exit. But Emperor Charm's knowledge in space was remarkable, and in just a few moments he had already seen through the layers and began breaking through as if bursting from a cocoon. Pierce was proud to have trapped him for as long as he did. Boom, 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 Boom! Within the equinox flower, Emperor Charm casually opened the layers of space following the invisible veins. When he reached the last layer, he suddenly halted his outstretched hand. There are a total of 997 layers in this space. This is the last layer, he muttered to himself calmly. The slightest smile broke out and a trace of mockery appeared in his eyes. He did not break through the last layer, but raised the starlight tracking spear in his hand. Pierce's nerves were rattled as he continued to stare at Emperor Charm in the equinox flower. Everyone, get ready, he is coming, oh no. When he saw that Emperor Charm had raised the starlight tracking spear, his eyes narrowed before shooting wide open again in shock and terror. Rigoberto, Atticus, you. Just then, a figure appeared on the backs of Rigoberto, Atticus and 4 other warriors. Puff, 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 the spear pierced through the 6 of them. 5 of the 6 shadowy figures of Emperor Charm that stood behind them disappeared in the blink of an eye, save for the one behind Rigoberto. With a gentle flap of his wings, innumerable little squares appeared on his body and he disappeared instantaneously. The next moment, he appeared in the sky once more. He had used the power of the starlight tracking spear to escape the equinox flower, hiding behind one of 6 warriors as protection from any attack. Naturally, he had escaped quite easily after that. He looked down at Pierce and said condescendingly, "What a childish and ridiculous game." As he spoke, he noticed a strange look on Pierce's face. Before he could finish his words, 6 threads suddenly emerged from his body with figures at the end of them, figures of the 6 he had just killed. They now looked cold and lifeless like zombies at the end of the strings. Earlier, Emperor Charm had exerted 6 rays of starlight witness on those including Rigoberto, Atticus and the other 4 warriors. Pierce had been thinking of a solution to counter his skill this whole time. Emperor Charm could come and go freely in the space. Even if he could trap him in the equinox flower, it could not imprison him permanently. It was almost impossible to seize him and attack. In the end, he was left with no choice but to try to make some headway in this fight through the sacrifice of Rigoberto, Atticus and the other 4. Chapter 3266, Siege. Pierce wasn't familiar with the exact abilities of every powerful warrior from other 6 mountains. After all, some warriors chose to hide their other short tokens after they obtained them, so they could use them to take their opponents by surprise. Having asked everyone about it through life vitality, he ended up turning to Master Hai. Ever since Master Hai had fled to the Oneness Sky Palace and had been stationed in the Dragon City, he hadn't been in a single fight. However, Master Hai had once fused with another short token of stage 32, a thumb-sized worm, which was known as the Corpse Weaver. This tiny worm's ability was to creep into the body of a person who had just died, triggering a very unique effect. The corpse would come to life, in another form, and could attack the person who had just killed them. Corpse weavers were suitable for creating latent thurgies. However, Master Hai hadn't used this other short token ever since he fled to the Oneness Sky Palace. Nevertheless, given the current circumstances, Pierce decided Master Hai needed to take action. The ability of the Corpse Weaver could only be activated after someone died, which meant that someone among the warriors at present must be killed for them to catch Emperor Charm. As all those warriors were afraid of death, they could only hope that Emperor Charm would break through the last layer of the equinox flower in the way they had anticipated. However, Emperor Charm still ended up using the starlight tracking spear to break out of the equinox flower, and at the time he was out, the 6 rays of starlight witness had already hung above the heads of 6 warriors. Their initial plan was then rendered useless and the Corpse Weaver was activated. Looking sadly at the 6 corpses before him, Master Hai shook his head slightly. In such a short period of time, dozens of warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace had been killed. Even the leaders of the 4 mountains had been killed by Emperor Charm. It was indeed heartbreaking. Although the 6 corpses moved a bit stiffly, they were incredibly fast. The second they came to life, they pounced on Emperor Charm. Emperor Charm glanced at them indifferently. As the corpses approached him, he abruptly twisted his body, his vast white wings as sharp as 2 blades. Crack, 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 crack. The power of the wings was as great as tens of thousands of divine megatons, but these corpses' bodies were as hard as gold and iron. They emerged from the attack unscathed. However, the impact of the blow was enough to send them flying backward. To Emperor Charm's annoyance, there was some sort of thread woven around him that linked him to the chests of the corpses. Just as he had sent them flying for about a few hundred feet, the threads suddenly grew taut and pulled them back. Emperor Charm's expression turned grim as he looked at the 6 corpses. Buzz! Reaching out his hand, a small square appeared on Emperor Charm's fingertip. With a flick of his finger, the square glowed a bright blue, enveloping one of the threads. When the square disappeared, the thread was still there, unharmed. Emperor Charm frowned. He actually couldn't cut the thread off. While he wasn't afraid of these corpses, he didn't understand how the corpse weaver worked. He still needed to face the powerful warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace. Dragging these corpses around while fighting would be such a nuisance. Master Hai's method worked. The corpses have trapped him. Pierce's eyes flashed. He felt a flicker of hope. Everyone, go. Everyone had been waiting anxiously by the equinox flower. When he had broken through using the spear, their plan was disrupted. But now, Pierce was telling them to follow through. Without hesitating, everyone charged towards Emperor Charm, shouting at the top of their lungs. Carrying the bone stick, the middle-aged man moved nimbly, appearing right behind Emperor Charm. Just then, another figure appeared. It looked exactly like him. He had made a duplicate using the mirror. The two figures raised their bone sticks above their heads, poised to strike. The bone sticks flashed, and a powerful force surged out like a tidal wave. Swoosh, swoosh. Seeing two bone sticks coming at him one after another, Emperor Charm frowned slightly. In the blink of an eye, his whole body disintegrated into countless tiny squares. Emperor Charm's grand teleportation was special. He didn't teleport through the space channel, so the others could not block him by entering the space channel. Normally, Emperor Charm could have appeared in another place, even in a place tens of thousands of miles away. But this time, he was dragging 6 corpses. The situation was different now, and the 6 corpses had not been teleported away. What everyone could see was that the threads connected to the 6 corpses suddenly grew taut, and the corpses were yanked into the air. Crack, crack, crack. As the 6 threads intertwined with the space, it was as if they had been pulled into a gear, making constant cracking sounds. Along the way, various cracks appeared in the space, as if someone had cut the sky with an irregular saber. Even though Emperor Charm was proficient in space theurgy, it was still impossible for him to teleport with the 6 corpses in tow. After a few moments, his body appeared once more, not very far away. How could the warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace let go of this opportunity? At the moment when Emperor Charm appeared again, the 2 middle-aged men who had attacked just now vanished in a flash, then appeared next to him once more. The 2 bone sticks whistled in the air as they were swiftly swung towards Emperor Charm's head. This time around, Emperor Charm didn't have the time to dodge. He tried to shield himself by wrapping his pair of white wings around his body. Boom, boom, thunderous noises echoed through the air as the 2 huge bone sticks hit Emperor Charm's body, releasing an incredible amount of power. Although Emperor Charm was able to protect himself with his wings, the force was enough to send him flying. His entire body fell down like a meteorite. Let me finish him. The voice came from a young man in black from the Bright Mountain. As he spoke, a black cross appeared above his head. Brandishing 2 swords, he launched himself towards Emperor Charm. Swish, swish, the 2 rays of sword radiance crisscrossed, aiming Emperor Charm at its center. Puff, puff, when the 2 rays of sword radiance hit Emperor Charm, thin lines appeared on his pure, white wings. Then, blood seeped out from the lines. He's injured, the young man in black cried out excitedly. Usually, it wasn't a big deal for the powerful warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace or Emperor Charm to be slightly injured. However, if a warrior at the chaotic source realm was injured, it usually meant that the chaotic source spirits inside them were fatigued. And once the chaotic source spirits did not work, the defensive power of Emperor Charm would greatly decrease. Just as the young man in black finished his attack, a golden arrow shot out from behind him, whizzing straight towards Emperor Charm. Boom! The arrow exploded, and rays of golden light shot out in all directions, piercing through Emperor Charm's dazzling wings. The archer, a strong warrior from the Bright Mountain, smiled in satisfaction when he saw his attack had also injured Emperor Charm. And me, another series of sword radiance slashed at him with a whistling sound. Emperor Charm had killed the leaders of the 4 mountains. The strong warriors of these mountains hated him to the core. Everyone wanted a chance to strike him, to avenge the fallen. Chapter 3267, Borrowing. The warriors from the 4 mountains weren't the only ones eager to strike Emperor Charm. Even Auden and the others launched their attacks simultaneously. Boom, boom, the attacks kept coming non-stop. As powerful as he was, Emperor Charm couldn't take these attacks head-on. His body flashed as small squares appeared on its surface. He tried to teleport once more, dragging the 6 corpses along. However, he could never get far. The corpses were truly weighing him down. No matter where he tried to flee, the warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace found him and attacked. After circling the sky a few more times, Emperor Charm finally realized it'd be impossible for him to evade all these attacks, not with the 6 corpses he was dragging. His patience running thin, he suddenly roared furiously. Then, a crack appeared between his eyebrows. A blue eyeball peeked from beneath the crack. Obviously, this eyeball was some kind of other shore token. For warriors at Emperor Charm's level, they would only merge with the rarest and most precious other shore tokens. The warriors who had been attacking him so fiercely just now hesitated slightly, not knowing what this other shore token could do. Swish! The blue eyeball emerged from the crack and floated in front of Emperor Charm. "Lend me your other shore token," said Emperor Charm. From millions of miles away, identical blue eyeballs appeared on the foreheads of the Divine Farmer, the Yellow Thirk, and Mahoney, the leader of the New Moon race. "I thought you said this'd be a piece of cake. Did I overestimate you?" Yellow Thirk teased. "Cut the garbage," Emperor Charm snapped coldly. Indeed, he had thought that, with the help of the Starlight Tracking Spear, killing these people should have been easy. He never expected he'd fall into such an embarrassing situation. He had been so pushed into a corner that he was forced to use the duplicating gemstone, which could only be used once. To make things even worse, he had to ask for help from these fellows. "Whose other shore token do you want?" "Divine Farmers are mine," Yellow Thirk asked. "I want Mahoney's," Emperor Charm exclaimed impatiently. Yellow Thirk raised a brow in astonishment. "What on earth are you up against?" On the other hand, Mahoney responded calmly. Summoning her other shore token, Mahoney reached out her hand and gently pressed her forehead. Both the eyeball on her forehead and the one in front of Emperor Charm flashed blue simultaneously. In an instant, Mahoney's other shore token traveled through space and appeared above Emperor Charm. Apparently, the blue eyeball allowed them to borrow each other's other shore tokens, no matter how far away they were from each other. The other shore token that Mahoney lent Emperor Charm was called the Spearhead Armor of Destruction. It was another shore token of the descending type that could greatly enhance one's body and strength. In Emperor Charm's eyes, it was the most suitable one for this situation. The other shore token floating above Emperor Charm melted like mercury and flowed around him, till it enveloped him completely, including his wings. After fusing with the other shore token, Emperor Charm emerged in front of the crowd. His eyes flashed with killing intent. The middle-aged man who wielded the bone stick had been following him closely. Buzz! The middle-aged man raised the bone stick in his hand the second he saw Emperor Charm. To his surprise, Emperor Charm charged directly at him, instead of escaping. In a flash, Emperor Charm had stretched out his wings and smacked the middle-aged man with incredible force. The middle-aged man was taken aback by this sudden attack. Without much time to react, he used the bone stick to try to block the blow. Although the bone stick was sturdy, after fusing with a new other shore token, Emperor Charm's strength increased greatly. Channeling the strength into his wings, the blow was strong enough to knock the bone stick out of the middle-aged man's hand. Bang! Left defenseless, the middle-aged man was stunned. Emperor Charm took this opportunity to land a punch onto the middle-aged man's belly. The strength in that punch was enough to pierce his belly right through, destroying his inner world completely. The middle-aged man shrieked in pain as he fell down from the sky. As the middle-aged man fell, 2 more warriors came at Emperor Charm. Raising their swords in the air, they shouted their battle cries. However, before they could even get close, a strong gust of wind blew them backwards. Emperor Charm started to spin at an extremely high speed, wielding the 6 corpses strung to him as weapons. Since the corpses were indestructible, they became lethal missiles whizzing through the air. Bang! Bang! With 2 heavy thuds, the corpses managed to hit the 2 warriors, knocking them out of the sky as well. Whoosh! Whoosh! Emperor Charm stopped trying to escape. Instead, he traveled through space and charged at the warriors head-on. The corpses that initially held him back were now some sort of weapon. Whoosh! 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 He flung the 6 corpses around as he kept changing direction. Every time he emerged in the space, he would smash corpses towards the warriors in his way. Bang! A warrior failed to dodge in time and fell from the sky after being hit by the corpses. Another tried to use spatial transference to escape. However, before he could flee into the space crack, Emperor Charm clenched his fist, crushing the space channel into shreds. The warrior stumbled out of the space channel, dazed and confused. Before he could react, a corpse smacked into him, knocking him out of the sky. Although the powerful warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace didn't die after being hit by the corpses, their chaotic source spirits were instantly exhausted and could no longer sustain their bodies. Some were so gravely injured that they were forced to retreat. Master Hai was dumbfounded as he watched this scene unfold before him. He had never expected his other shore token would be used against them. After smacking warrior after warrior out of the sky, Emperor Charm managed to change the tide of the battle. Just then, a burly man teleported to Emperor Charm's side, wielding a huge sword. With a roar, he swung the sword towards Emperor Charm's head. The huge sword erupted 80,000 divine megatons of force. When the sword radiance was produced, it was accompanied by a shrill scream. The scream supposedly had the effect of disturbing one's mind. However, Emperor Charm just sneered. Tilting his head slightly, a corpse was pulled backward. With a heavy crack, it smashed into the burly man's back. Staggering forward, the burly man was thrown off balance. Emperor Charm dodged the sword with ease, and turned to kick the burly man on the back. Go to perdition, whoosh, the man fell from the sky like a meteor and smashed into the Supreme Dragon Hall. Emperor Charm's kick had released tens of thousands of divine megatons of force. The Supreme Dragon Hall collapsed with a loud bang at the impact. In the center of the hall, Eastern Emperor Tai sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. He was still trapped on the other shore. Seeing that the Supreme Dragon Hall was destroyed, the expressions of the warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace all fell. Go and protect Eastern Emperor Tai. We can't let him approach the Supreme Dragon Hall anymore. Stop him. Chaos erupted among the warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace while Emperor Charm looked down at them from the sky. He stared quietly at the figure of Eastern Emperor Tai. Once upon a time, they were like blood brothers. However, in the end, they turned against each other and went along different paths. And now, it was finally the time for him to end his life. Originally, Emperor Charm planned to kill all the remaining warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace before facing Eastern Emperor Tai. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt that there was no need to go about it the hard way. Whoosh, taking a step forward, countless blue squares enveloped him, swallowing him into space. In the blink of an eye, Emperor Charm landed in front of the cross-legged figure. Chapter 3268, A Giant Bird. How could so many powerful warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace let Emperor Charm approach Eastern Emperor Tai? The powerful warriors, who still had the strength to fight, instantly acted. Emperor Charm was shuttling through the space, and they couldn't capture him, so they all shifted their target and immediately pounced on those corpses. Pierce and Auden also joined them. These powerful warriors grabbed the corpses and dragged them to the opposite direction. The other shore power they emitted formed a joint force that couldn't be underestimated. As a result, Emperor Charm's attacking momentum was forcefully stopped. Buzz! Emperor Charm showed up from the void and looked back at the people holding the corpses behind him. There was a glint of killing intent in his eyes. He turned back swiftly and crashed into the nearest person. Bang, bang, bang! Relying on Mahoney's other shore token, Emperor Charm was practically able to go on the rampage in hand-to-hand combat. With his wild, violent fighting method, 4 people who were dragging a corpse were sent flying by his attack in an instant. Without any pause, Emperor Charm went straight to another corpse. Despite the fact that she was treating Elvinia on the ground below, Flamin's attention to the situation above never decreased. Seeing that Emperor Charm was gradually gaining the upper hand, she became more and more anxious. She had exerted a lot of energy in this battle, so she was practically at the end of her tether now. She could do nothing to help. In her anxiety, she looked around. When her sight fell on Zen, an idea suddenly popped out in her mind. She said, Zen, go and carry Eastern Emperor Tai on your back. Let's escape together. Eastern Emperor Tai was the core essence of the Oneness Sky Palace. If Eastern Emperor Tai died, the Oneness Sky Palace would really be done for. Okay, Zen answered, nodding his head. Previously, Zen had told the members of the Sun Crow race to fight against Emperor Charm together. However, the Bering race was watching the scene from the other side. When they saw that Emperor Charm gained the upper hand, they seemed to want to join the battle and help Emperor Charm. Zen sent some members of the Sun Crow race to stop Emperor Charm, while the rest was arranged by him to guard against the members of the Bering race. At the very least, this arrangement should deter the Bering race from acting rashly. Zen's gaze fell on Lavender, Laquisha and Nellie. The situation was critical now. Even though they met again, Zen didn't talk much with them. The 3 girls were quite considerate. They stayed in a corner quietly when they couldn't help. You can hide in my inner world first, said Zen. Back then, he was willing to put them out of his inner world because the Oneness Sky Palace was very safe. But now that the Oneness Sky Palace was in turmoil, hiding in his inner world was the safest option for them. None of them objected to Zen's suggestion. After all, they didn't have what it took to participate in a battle of this scale. If they stayed outside, they would only be a drag on Zen. After taking the three girls into his inner world, Zen's figure zoomed away so fast that he looked like he suddenly disappeared from where he was. Before long, he already appeared inside the hall. Eastern Emperor Tai looked still calm. Since he was on the other shore, he didn't know what was happening here. Zen couldn't help but let out a soft sigh when he saw Eastern Emperor Tai's serene expression. It wasn't easy for the Oneness Sky Palace, which Eastern Emperor Tai personally ran, to develop to this level. In the blink of an eye, however, it was already on the verge of destruction. Zen couldn't help but sigh at this change. He stretched out his hand, took Eastern Emperor Tai, and carried him on his back. With one light leap, he already appeared by Flamin's side again. After dealing with Elvinia's injuries, Flamin also carried her on her back. In fact, it was impossible for Elvinia to withstand that blow with her own strength. A force worth 15,000 divine megatons was enough to tear her apart. However, when her chaotic source spirits were exhausted, a latent theurgy that Eastern Emperor Tai had personally planted in her quietly became active. This protective latent theurgy had saved her life at such a critical moment. Seeing that Zen was going to carry Eastern Emperor Tai away, the powerful warriors of the Bering race, who had been watching from afar, finally became agitated and started to make their moves. They couldn't just let such a good opportunity slip away. Some members of the Sun Crow race noticed the uproar among the Bering race. Vigilant expressions appeared on their faces. After all, Zen had ordered them to block these people. Guys, this is a good opportunity to kill Eastern Emperor Tai. You guys work together and hold these birds back, Hancock suddenly suggested. The other members of the Bering race also knew that they couldn't delay any longer. They had to take advantage of the current opportunity, so they took out the other shore tokens they had and rushed towards the members of the Sun Crow race. While the powerful warriors of the two races were engaged in a fierce battle, Hancock squinted, took a step back, and directly used the grand teleportation. Along with a spatial fluctuation, he appeared next to Flamin and Zen. Run! Hancock's sudden appearance made Flamin's expression change in an instant. As the divine flame of the Sun Crow race showed up in her hand, Flamin stretched her hand towards Hancock's head in her attempt to buy some time for Zen to escape. Zen didn't want to stay any longer and hurried into the space channel. Flamin's strength had been weakened greatly in the battle, and her speed was also much slower than before. Seeing that Flamin stretched out her hand towards him, Hancock immediately moved and dodged Flamin easily. He bypassed her, stretched out his hand towards Zen's back, grabbed the shoulder of Eastern Emperor Tai, and pulled him violently. Zen had already stepped into the space channel when he felt the weight of the burden on his back disappearing. He looked back, only to find that Eastern Emperor Tai had been pulled away by Hancock and that he had stepped into the space channel alone. When Hancock captured Eastern Emperor Tai, a wild and arrogant smile bloomed on his face. In a flash, a scarlet dagger appeared in his other hand, and he swung it towards the top of Eastern Emperor Tai's head. Ding! In any case, Eastern Emperor Tai had stronger chaotic source spirits than ordinary people. Hancock's scarlet dagger carried a force of tens of thousands of divine megatons. But despite the crisp sound, Eastern Emperor Tai wasn't damaged. Nevertheless, the endurance of chaotic source spirits was still limited. If Eastern Emperor Tai was stabbed repeatedly, his chaotic source spirits would be exhausted sooner or later. It was just a matter of time. No, Flamin's face turned deathly pale. With Elvinia on her back, she pounced over and tried to headbutt Hancock. Hancock didn't take her seriously. He casually kicked her away and stabbed the scarlet dagger towards Eastern Emperor Tai for the second time. Ding! A crisp sound once again rang. Eastern Emperor Tai's chaotic source spirits withstood this attack again. As expected of Eastern Emperor Tai, you've managed to withstand my strikes twice only with the help of the chaotic source spirits. Now, let me see if you can withstand my third strike. As he spoke, Hancock raised his scarlet dagger again. At this moment, the weak Elvinia opened her eyes. Just now, Flamin had spent quite a while in treating Elvinia's injuries so that her soul of light was gradually stabilized. The moment Elvinia opened her eyes, she saw Hancock holding a dagger and trying to stab Eastern Emperor Tai with it. Despite her being still a little dazed, an unknown power burst inside her, and she directly pounced on Hancock. When Hancock saw Elvinia rush to him, his eyes glinted. Without thinking too much, he raised his dagger and swung it towards Elvinia. Puff! The dagger pierced into Elvinia's neck. Blood spurted from her fair neck, and her head drooped to the side. Elvinia! Flamin let out a shrill scream. On the other hand, Zen also appeared from the space channel. When he saw this scene, fury blazed in his eyes. However, Hancock nonchalantly threw Elvinia to the side. He raised his scarlet dagger, intending to stab Eastern Emperor Tai again. But right at this moment, the shadow of a giant bird suddenly appeared above Elvinia's head. Along with the appearance of the shadow, a loud chirp that drew everyone's attention echoed around. Chapter 3269, Kill with Poison. When Zen saw the huge shadow of the bird, he was stunned for a brief moment, but then a look of ecstasy soon appeared on his face. The three-eyed dragon sparrow. It was the highest-level treasure of the Star Falcon race. Zen clearly remembered giving this other shore token to Elvinia before. Flamen continued to grieve as she sat on the ground. A puzzled look was visible on her face as she witnessed the sudden appearance of the huge bird. Meanwhile, Hancock also looked surprised. Where did it come from? Am I the one who attracted it? He thought. They knew that it wasn't just any ordinary sparrow. Its aura was extremely strong, which definitely meant that it wasn't an ordinary other shore creature. Swoosh. Before Hancock could react, the three-eyed dragon sparrow already flew towards him and tried to peck his head. The sparrow flew back and forth and attacked without ceasing. In its first few attacks, Hancock was easily protected by the chaotic source spirits. However, with the sparrow's last peck, the chaotic source spirits were finally exhausted. The sparrow's long beak was able to break through and inflict a deep gash on his chest, which eventually bled profusely. The three-eyed dragon sparrow was such a savage creature that it treated Hancock like an earthworm. It was pretty determined to strike him until he became its meal. However, Hancock was a pretty strong warrior who had reached stage 32. There was no way that he would just stand by and become the sparrow's snack. After he came to his senses, his face was quickly filled with anger as he readied for a counterattack. When he drew close enough, he used his blood-red dagger to slash the neck of the three-eyed dragon sparrow. Shing, shing, shing. Though his dagger was very sharp, the defenses of the huge sparrow were not to be underestimated. Ultimately, the dagger only left a few scratches on the sparrow's body. What the heck, why can't I kill it? Hancock was so annoyed that the sparrow was giving him a hard time. He then changed his approach and attacked it with his fist. Crash! The three-eyed dragon sparrow was knocked back by the impact of Hancock's massive punch. The sparrow was a 6th grade other shore token from stage 14, but it didn't contain an endless amount of power like the civilization artifact. As the top treasure of the Star Falcon race, it could easily deal with ordinary chaotic source realm warriors. Unfortunately, its prowess would fall short in the face of an elite warrior like Hancock. After the three-eyed dragon sparrow directly took Hancock's fist, it became more agitated. It suddenly flapped its wings so hard and aggressively flew towards him, intending to swallow him whole. Hancock was able to dodge the attack and countered it by letting out a few heavy punches. Once again, the huge sparrow was forced to fly back. Flamen's face grew paler by the moment. She didn't dare to look at her daughter's face. She was frustrated with the fact that the sparrow appeared after her daughter was already dead. If it was trying to protect her, it should have done sooner. While thinking about this, Flamen wasn't able to hold back her tears and began to sob. Zen stared at the movements of the giant sparrow, and a plan started brewing in his head. The three-eyed dragon sparrow could bring Elvinia back to life. There weren't many other shore tokens that possessed such incredible abilities. But in order to do that, the three-eyed dragon sparrow had to kill the person who had killed Elvinia. The only problem was that the sparrow alone wouldn't be able to bring down Hancock. In fact, it was already being beaten slowly. Upon hearing the sobbing voice of Flamen, Zen spoke in a soft voice, "Lady Flamen, take good care of Eastern Emperor Tai. It's not yet too late. We can still bring Elvinia back." Flamen was so surprised when she heard Zen's words. She would not abandon any shred of hope if there was a chance that they could bring her daughter back to life. Immediately, Zen dropped to the ground on all fours. Then, the structure of his body began to change. Sclerites stood up all over his body except the ones on his head. In just a matter of seconds, Zen's appearance didn't look human anymore. As the sclerites continued to roll up, a tail formed and appeared behind him. Flamen was stunned. She began to have doubts if Zen was actually a human. Was he just disguising himself this whole time? Did the Oneness Sky Palace know about this? Zen didn't care about Flamen's thoughts at the moment. He needed to do what he could to save Elvinia. After activating the blood of the Chaos Ancient God, he crawled on the ground like a beast, and focused his eyes on Hancock. The three-eyed dragon sparrow was somewhat similar to the corpse weaver of Master Hai. Both of them were used to avenge the dead, but the corpse weaver was definitely more powerful as the corpses couldn't be killed at all. Even a powerful warrior like Emperor Charm wouldn't be able to destroy them. In terms of endurance, the three-eyed dragon sparrow was also inferior. After being bombarded by Hancock's attacks for quite a few times, it showed a trace of fatigue, and its power also decreased. "I'll smash you to pieces, you cursed bird." Crash, crash, crash. Hancock's fists were soon stained by the blood of the sparrow. The weakened sparrow wasn't able to dodge most of his attacks, so it started retreating. It lost its earlier aggressiveness and became the one who was on the defensive. Not long after, many cracks appeared on the surface of the three-eyed dragon sparrow. This was a sign that it was about to collapse. Hancock was about to deliver his final blow. He put his hands together and an ominous red light began to shine brightly. "I'm going to finish you off. Go to perdition." Just when Hancock was about to attack, Zen pushed his hands and feet so hard to the ground. Using them as a spring, he bounced off the ground and appeared beside Hancock in the blink of an eye. If Hancock was an ordinary warrior, he wouldn't have enough time to react and dodge Zen's sudden attack. However, Hancock's strength was even comparable to that of Athamar and Goran. He reacted so quickly and even managed to maneuver for a counterattack. "Are you kidding? You think you could pull off a sneak attack on me?" "I don't think so." The moment Hancock felt the space fluctuation near him, he retracted back and tried to punch Zen's chest as hard as he could. Zen was also able to react quickly. He withdrew his hands to cover his chest with his arms. Boom! He took a direct hit from Hancock and was sent flying backward. When the power of tens of thousands of divine megatons smashed into his body, Zen felt his blood surge up that he almost suffocated. However, as he flew backward, a smile appeared at the corners of his lips. Noticing the weird smile on Zen's face, Hancock couldn't help but wonder inwardly, is this guy insane? How could he still smile when he is getting a beating? Even if he isn't killed by that strike, I'm sure that he will be at least half dead. However, there was one thing that Hancock didn't put into consideration. He ignored the change in the structure of Zen's body. When Zen executed his sneak attack earlier, he quickly placed his tail at Hancock's nape. Before he was blasted off by Hancock, Zen's tail managed to pierce through his nape. Much earlier, the three-eyed dragon sparrow was able to exhaust all of Hancock's chaotic source spirits due to its ceaseless attacks. Therefore, without the safeguarding of the spirits, Zen was able to penetrate the back of Hancock's neck. It was too late when Hancock noticed what Zen did. Immediately after, Hancock's body trembled and his vision became blurry. He reached the back of his neck with his wobbly hand and felt a trace of a tiny bloodstain. He looked at Zen in disbelief as his body continued to lose balance. "What poison did you?" Before he could finish his sentence, his body dropped to the ground with a flop. The same moment that he fell, the three-eyed dragon sparrow hurriedly swooped down and swallowed him whole. It spread its wings and flew towards Elvenia. Chapter 3270, Possessing the Body. The three-eyed dragon sparrow flew over and tried to catch Elvenia in its mouth. The sight shocked Flamen, but she chose to stand her ground and not do anything yet. Zen's reminder echoed in her mind as she remembered the treasure held by the Star Falcon race of Stage 14 of the Other Shore. She was still a member of the Sun Crow race when she heard about the three-eyed dragon sparrow. She had only heard of it back then, but now, it was right in front of her. After it completely swallowed Elvenia, the three-eyed dragon sparrow bent down low and crawled on the ground. In just a few short moments, it let out a long, shrill cry as it beat its wings wildly and leapt. A giant egg was left from where it once stood. Crack, crack, crack. There was a series of large cracks as the egg broke into pieces, revealing a very much alive Elvenia. With her appearance came the sharp roar of the three-eyed dragon sparrow. Pop! One of its eyes had exploded, partially blinding the creature. From what Zen heard before, the three-eyed dragon sparrow had the ability to save its master thrice. Each rescue would result in blinding one of its eyes. At the sight of the scene, Elvenia immediately understood what just happened. She died and used up one of the chances of salvation from the three-eyed dragon sparrow. Whoosh! Now blinded on one eye, the three-eyed dragon sparrow circled the air once before rushing down towards Elvenia and returning to the inner world that carried it. After Zen restored the sclerites in his body, he walked over towards Flamen, who looked at him with a complicated expression. Hancock's tolerance to poison was far beyond anyone's imagination, but he instantly died after being stabbed by Zen's tail. Just what kind of horrifying poison did Zen carry? Flamen was about to ask when another violent fluctuation came from the sky. Boom! It was so loud, deafening even, and for a brief second, they thought the world had been shattered. Auden's body came tumbling down from the sky and smashed onto the Oneness Mountain like a broken sandbag. Rumble! The impact caused the entire Oneness Mountain to shake violently. A crack appeared in the peak, running across the entire length of the mountain. The east side of the Oneness Mountain was relatively flat and faced the Dragon City, while the west side, wherein the Phoenix Palace was located, was a bit more concave. It was on the steep area of the west side that the crack appeared. It wasn't just Auden who fell, a few more people also began to smash down onto the mountain face. Emperor Charm was no doubt furious with how violent and heavy his attacks were. Boom, boom, people like Auden who were stronger than the average warriors could still survive the impact, though with serious injuries. The weaker ones were not so lucky. Before they even reached the mountain, their bodies had already turned into a disgusting mass of flesh and blood. As bodies continued to rain down from the sky, the crack in the middle of the mountain continued to expand, furthering the chances of the entire Oneness Mountain being cut in half. "We'd better get out of here as soon as possible," Flamen told them. Pierce and the others had taken the risk in order to save Eastern Emperor Tai, while the members of the Bering race were blocked by the Sun Crow race. This was their only chance to escape along with Eastern Emperor Tai. However, Zen didn't have the same thought process. As he looked at the mountain on the verge of collapse, he suddenly thought of Letitia and Margaret. It wasn't that big of a problem since everyone in the Flow Sword sect could fly, but it could not be denied that the Bloom Divine Province had become a dangerous place to be in. Zen knew he would have to bring them with him if they left. Zen had planned for Elvenia to leave with Eastern Emperor Tai while he went to the Flow Sword sect. Unfortunately, before he could say anything, Emperor Charm suddenly appeared and swooped down over them. The other shore token Mahoney lent him proved extremely effective in contending against dozens of enemies, to his advantage. "Run!" Flamen screamed. With a wave of her hand, Zen, Elvenia, and Eastern Emperor Tai were enveloped by a piece of space. As a demon woman of the Divine Lair in the past, she was also quite proficient in space theurgy. However, just as they were about to move, Emperor Charm was already at their heels. He stretched out a finger and summoned a blue cube out of nowhere. Wow! This blue cube slammed down on Flamen, Zen, Elvenia, and Eastern Emperor Tai, trapping them within. There was no escape. The space around them was locked. Flamen's expression darkened. She tried to create another space channel, but the blue cube was unyielding. There was no way they could get out of this one. The most proficient master when it came to space theurgy, aside from that chaos ancient god, was Emperor Charm. "Is it useless?" Zen asked. His gaze hardened and he decided to throw a punch towards the cube. Boom! Aside from a muffled sound, there was no sort of fluctuation in the entire space. With them locked up, Emperor Charm became even more unbridled and direct. He soared into the sky before diving back towards the Oneness Mountain. As he descended, Emperor Charm's body dissolved into countless blue cubes that scattered all over the mountain. The strong warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace, including Pierce, could only rely on their own physical bodies to collide with these cubes. Boom, 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 boom. Numerous explosions erupted all over the mountain as Pierce and his companions collided against Emperor Charm's cubes. Soon enough, Emperor Charm came out of the mountain and continued his assault, further widening the crack on the mountain face. "I can't break Emperor Charm's space imprisonment," Flamen exclaimed in panic. She paced back and forth within the cube, her face marred with anxiety. Elvenia couldn't help but feel restless upon seeing her mother so disturbed. Meanwhile, Zen was lost in thought as he stared at Eastern Emperor Tai. A strategy was currently being formulated in his mind. Eastern Emperor Tai is on the other shore. If we control his physical body, then his strength could be used, right? He asked. Both Hui and the real Emperor Charm remained beside him and hadn't yet returned to the civilization artifact. There was no way they were going to miss what was happening outside. Hui was the first one to speak. "You want our souls to possess his body?" Emperor Charm shook his head. As a supreme master, Eastern Emperor Tai surely has a powerful secret weapon to protect him. It won't be easy for us to control him with the energy soul. Zen considered their inputs for a moment. What about letting the real Eastern Emperor Tai try? He asked. In theory, the two Eastern Emperor Tais were the same person. This one in front of them was only a replica projected to this round of chaos. Emperor Charm's and Hui's eyes flashed upon hearing Zen's suggestion. Nobody in history had ever done such a thing, so naturally they needed to try it for themselves. In no time at all, a third figure appeared above Zen's head, none other than Eastern Emperor Tai. Flamen's eyes widened upon the sight. This Eastern Emperor Tai felt so familiar yet also so strange to her. Elvenia had seen this person in the creation myth temple but was still stunned for a brief moment. Her heart thumped upon the realization of what Zen intended to do. "Lady Flamen, do you mind letting us use Eastern Emperor Tai's body for the time being?" Zen asked. Flamen gaped at Zen. She had no idea what the man intended to do. However, since they were already in such a tight situation, anything was worth trying. Chapter 3271, Eastern Emperor Tai's Energy Soul. Flamen and Elvinia saw the energy soul of Eastern Emperor Tai as it went straight to his head. Eastern Emperor Tai owns a special soul pendant. This strand of soul, said Flamen, but she trailed off in hesitation. With the protection of the soul pendant, no one could snatch Eastern Emperor Tai's body shell. The energy soul released by Zen would probably be instantly recognized by the soul pendant and then annihilated. However, this energy soul was a strand of the soul of Eastern Emperor Tai himself, though it gave off a strange aura. While Flamen was worried, the energy soul entered Eastern Emperor Tai's body without a hitch. Within a few seconds, his eyelids trembled and he opened his eyes. His eyes shone brightly, as if stars were within them. Flamen gave a hard look at Eastern Emperor Tai. She couldn't stop blinking in disbelief that he had woken up. Your Majesty, Flamen couldn't help but grab onto him, feeling him to make sure he was real and alive. Embarrassed on behalf of Flamen, Elvinia pulled her back and said, "Mother, that is not my father." From her experience on the other shore, she knew the truth. However, she had no clue whether the man before them was the real Eastern Emperor Tai or not. After all, both the soul and the body belonged to Eastern Emperor Tai, though one was real and the other was a clone. She couldn't help but still be puzzled. "It's impossible," said Flamen, shaking her head. If the body shell of Eastern Emperor Tai had really been snatched, his aura wouldn't be as familiar as it was right now. Because of this, she stuck to her judgment and decided that Zen probably woke up Eastern Emperor Tai by some means. Eastern Emperor Tai took a look at Flamen and then turned towards Elvinia. He gave her a warm smile as he said, "We meet again. Is this your mother?" "Yes," Elvinia replied with a nod. "She seems to have mistaken you for my father." Eastern Emperor Tai nodded back and looked at Flamen. "I am indeed Eastern Emperor Tai, but not the one you knew. He was a seed I sowed in the chaos." "A seed?" Flamen gasped, not knowing what was going on. Seeing the confusion of her mother, Elvinia continued to explain, "The real Eastern Emperor Tai went to the other shore a long time ago. Mother, you must have heard of the human race on the other shore, right? My father was a clone created by the real Eastern Emperor Tai." She made sure to keep it simple so that she didn't bombard Flamen with the news. Flamen nodded as she tried to absorb everything. She had heard of all kinds of legends about the human race on the other shore from her husband, but she had never seen them once in her life. Zen, who observed from the side, gave a faint smile. "Eastern Emperor Tai, may I know how much strength you can display?" He placed the energy soul of Eastern Emperor Tai into the body so that he had the power to go against Emperor Charm. If Eastern Emperor Tai didn't exert all his strength, they might as well be doomed. Just as Eastern Emperor Tai stood up, he reached out his arm and the purple rainbow sword materialized. After he gave it a good look, his eyes looked up towards Zen. "What a good sword." He couldn't help but be impressed. "The gap between souls can't be ignored," he continued, "but in other aspects, I may be able to display 100% of the strength." The strand of energy soul was too weak that Eastern Emperor Tai could not withstand the soul attacks. However, with the help of the soul pendant, he was not threatened by ordinary soul attacks. Furthermore, there was no guarantee that Emperor Charm would use the soul attack on him. Just then, Eastern Emperor Tai began to read and analyze the memory flames of his clone. If it was a soul invasion, reading the memory flames would take a while and could even be rejected. This was because the memory flames did not belong to him. However, it seemed that the real Eastern Emperor Tai was not bothered with any of these problems. As if instantaneously, he was able to read and understand all the memory flames. Boom! Right there and then, a loud boom echoed from the Oneness Mountain. On the surface of the mountain, big holes and gashes appeared. Along with small blue squares, Emperor Charm flew high into the sky again. As he dragged the corpses, they began to break even if they were woven by the corpse weaver. Apparently, even if they were determined to get revenge, they still had a limit. As for the strong warriors like Pierce who hung onto the corpses, they were covered and smeared in dust and dirt. At this point, Emperor Charm had thrown away many people, leaving only 5 people behind. Included among these people was Pierce. "Since you seem so persistent, don't blame me for this," said Emperor Charm, looking back at Pierce with a smirk across his face. As he spoke his last word, he opened his wings wide. A shadow of the sun appeared behind him, and the temperature of the atmosphere rose. Because he'd already used the 9 Sun World Destruction Theurgy, he could not use it again. However, this was no problem to him, because he could still release the strongest divine flames of the Sun Crow race. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. As his wings flapped and lifted him into the air, fire snakes grew out from the sun's shadow behind him. These snakes stretched out their necks and spouted flames, all directed towards Pierce and the rest. Swish, swish, swish. As the flames rushed towards the group, they tried their best to dodge. If not, they would be burnt to ashes. Clinging onto the mountain wall, Auden shouted, "Elder Pierce, please let go." It seemed that there was no point in trying to stop Emperor Charm, because he was determined to kill Eastern Emperor Tai. No, Pierce used the back of his hand to wipe the mud off his face. He then summoned his other shore token. All of a sudden, equinox flowers began to sprout and bloom one after another around him and the others. The equinox flowers were not as effective as the one that had trapped Emperor Charm before, but they were still capable of absorbing everything through the space theurgy. As the fire snakes spat out flames, the flowers absorbed them and they disappeared without a trace. Ha ha, seeing the helpless thing Pierce did, Emperor Charm couldn't help but let out a chuckle. As more flames were thrown at the flowers, they rose into flames and the inner spaces were burned through and through. Phew, phew. All of a sudden, the blazing divine flames spread out and made their way towards one of the men, instantly burning him to ashes. Though Pierce was not one to give up, he had to act smartly. He finally let go of the corpse, and the others followed suit. Pierce continued to move, but shook his head in disbelief. They had failed. While the group retreated, the once indestructible corpses collapsed and were burned to a crisp. Just then, Pierce descended from the sky and landed on a huge stone, kneeling and facing down. Crack. As soon as his kneel made contact with the stone, it disintegrated into powder. In fact, the direction to which he knelt was the Phoenix Palace. For countless years, he had been working for Eastern Emperor Tai with much loyalty and perseverance. He couldn't help but be consumed by disappointment due to the fact that he wasn't able to protect him. After kowtowing, he continued to ascend back into the sky. At this point, all he could do was fight with his life. Chapter 3272, The Fake Eastern Emperor Tai. A gust of wind blew as Pierce jumped upwards. His hand shook violently, and the back of his palm up to his arm burst into cracks. Puff! Blood gushed from the cracks and spread out until it turned into a handful of blood mist. He gently brushed the blood mist in his hand, and then a long sword condensed from the mist. God-detaining sword. The moment he pulled out his sword, the area around him shook again, and another handful of blood mist bloomed. He stretched out his hand, and a second sword was condensed from the blood mist. Diabolic sword. Crane sword. More blood mist spurted out from his arm and condensed another long sword. Afterwards, more than 10 long swords floated beside him. Unite. As soon as Pierce uttered the word, all the swords piled up to form one sword and the aura of the sword became stronger. Demon Annihilating Hand. Just then, he brought out another shore token. It was a black ghost hand with jagged skin and sharp nails. The black ghost hand quickly replaced Pierce's original hand and fitted itself over his forearm like a glove. Then, he grabbed the sword and disappeared in a flash. Whoosh! In the next second, he appeared behind Emperor Charm. He wasted no time and immediately swung his long sword, slashing towards Emperor Charm. Crack! As a descending type of other shore token, the ghost hand had also released many divine megatons of power. Furthermore, the sword strike was especially forceful because Pierce forged his sword with the blood essence. But as soon as the sword slashed down, the corners of Emperor Charm's mouth curved slightly. Suddenly, he grabbed one of the ghost hand's fingers, lifted it, and sent Pierce rolling in the air. Bang! Pierce flew up high in the sky, and then landed on the ground not far away from Zen with a heavy thud. He had consumed too much of his blood essence already. He almost collapsed after he fell, but there wasn't much blood that flowed from his wound. His face was even as white as a sheet. I've tried my best. Suddenly, an idea flashed through his mind. If there was still anything he could do to change the situation, that would be burning the other shore token. However, burning the other shore token was a taboo for many people in this world. Even if he didn't do so, he thought that Eastern Emperor Tai might not blame him. Just as he lay on the ground waiting for Emperor Charm to kill him, his gaze turned to Zen. His eyes narrowed into slits, and he quickly became shocked. He saw Eastern Emperor Tai open his eyes and stand up. Eastern Emperor Tai was awake. When he looked more closely at Eastern Emperor Tai, Emperor Charm who was in the sky looked down at the ground. He was amazed and confused at the same time. How did that happen? Someone is possessing Eastern Emperor Tai's body shell, he thought. That was the first thought that came to his mind. Since Eastern Emperor Tai was trapped on the other shore, it was impossible for him to return. After he came to a realization, his confusion and astonishment turned to anger. He and Eastern Emperor Tai had a close relationship in the past. Even if he wanted to kill Eastern Emperor Tai, he would not allow anyone to take Eastern Emperor Tai's body shell. Moreover, it was an act of humiliation to Eastern Emperor Tai. "Who are you?" asked Emperor Charm in a cold voice. Eastern Emperor Tai looked up at Emperor Charm in the sky, his face full of confidence. "I am Eastern Emperor Tai, the master of the Starry Sword region," he declared. Once again, Emperor Charm was stunned. Based on Eastern Emperor Tai's expression, he didn't look like he lied, but what did he mean by the master of the Starry Sword region? Even Zen was a little shocked. It would be the best if he could frighten away Emperor Charm by taking advantage of Eastern Emperor Tai's own title. Why did he say that he was the master of the Starry Sword region, which confused everyone? Of course, Zen didn't know that Eastern Emperor Tai was trembling with excitement after he had obtained the physical body. He had never seen the chaos for many years. He had been there over 1,000 chaotic eras ago. And today, he got the same chance again. He wasn't afraid of fighting at all. In fact, he wanted to battle. If Emperor Charm really ran away, he would be very upset. Meanwhile, Emperor Charm's face darkened. He was already sure that someone had taken Eastern Emperor Tai's body shell. Anyway, he wouldn't even have a meaningless argument with Eastern Emperor Tai. With a pinch of his hand, the blue cube began to shrink. As the blue cube shrank, it was enough to crush the people inside into meat paste. Eastern Emperor Tai's eyes narrowed into slits as he looked at the shrinking space with a smile. He stretched out 2 fingers and gently scratched the space. Swish! When the 2 scratch marks appeared on the space exploded. It is the perfect space construction method. However, such a small trick cannot be used to trap me. Ha ha, Eastern Emperor Tai said as he kicked the ground lightly and flew up. On the other hand, Emperor Charm became even more confused. It seemed that Eastern Emperor Tai knew his space theurgy very well. In the air, Eastern Emperor Tai looked around. The current world was completely different from the 77th chaos. The 77th chaos was filled with the starry regions of various sizes, but this space right now was a vast and boundless land. He tore his gaze off his surroundings and held the purple rainbow sword in his hand. Buzz! The purple rainbow sword shook slightly, and a melodious sound filled the air. It turned out that Eastern Emperor Tai made a series of strange sounds with the sword. The sound was melodious and pleasant at first, but as it became louder and louder, it suddenly made people feel irritable. Emperor Charm stared at Eastern Emperor Tai. He wanted to see what the fake Eastern Emperor Tai was up to, so he listened carefully. Surprisingly, Eastern Emperor Tai suddenly stretched out his finger and flicked the purple rainbow sword. Ding! When the sound turned harsh, Emperor Charm felt as if his heart exploded. Then, he was in a trance. Whoosh! Eastern Emperor Tai swiftly took advantage of this opportunity. He raised his sword and stabbed Emperor Charm. By the time Emperor Charm had regained consciousness, the tip of the sword had almost reached his chest. However, his expression changed. He barely dodged the stab, turned into countless blue squares and quickly disappeared. Emperor Charm appeared not far away and stared at Eastern Emperor Tai with his cold eyes. "Where did you learn the small trick?" he asked. In turn, Eastern Emperor Tai held the purple rainbow sword and said with a faint smile, "Someone almost died due to such a small trick." Now, not only Emperor Charm but also Pierce, who lay motionless on the ground, Auden, and the others, understood that this person was not the Eastern Emperor Tai they knew. After all, Eastern Emperor Tai regarded himself as a decent swordsman after he had founded the Oneness Sky Palace. He was honest and upright in his ways. He would never cultivate such a skill. As for how this person had easily possessed Eastern Emperor Tai's body shell, they couldn't understand either. Still, Eastern Emperor Tai didn't care about the others' stares at all. It wasn't easy for him to attain his freedom. Besides, he just wanted to apply what he had deduced for so many years, especially because the other shore's environment was still very different from the chaos. Chapter 3273, Golden Rune Swords. Emperor Charm stared at Eastern Emperor Tai, his dark eyes expressing a strong killing intent. "Then I want to see what your little trick is capable of." Swoosh! Emperor Charm stretched out his right hand, and the starlight tracking spear appeared. He pointed his left hand at Eastern Emperor Tai, and then a beam of starlight fell and floated above the latter's head. Eastern Emperor Tai, Pierce and the other powerful warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace immediately panicked at the sight of the starlight. They had witnessed how Emperor Charm had used the Starlight Tracking Spear to kill many powerful warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace. Of course, they didn't want Eastern Emperor Tai to end up the same. However, they didn't have time to warn him. The Starlight Tracking Spear had already marked him. Meanwhile, Emperor Charm lifted his spear and disappeared. At that moment, Eastern Emperor Tai seemed to be still looking at the starlight above his head and thinking of a solution. As soon as Emperor Charm vanished, Eastern Emperor Tai rushed towards the front of the mountain wall with the Starlight Witness. Buzz! Just then, Emperor Charm appeared again and stabbed forward with his spear. With his strength, Eastern Emperor Tai would never be able to avoid an attack launched behind him. Moreover, this Eastern Emperor Tai was just a fake one. Crack! Did I stab him? Emperor Charm thought, but he quickly felt that something was wrong. He didn't feel like he had stabbed Eastern Emperor Tai. He looked into the distance and was shocked at what he saw. In front of him was a huge mountain wall, and his spear had bored a huge hole on its surface. Crack, 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 there was already a crack on the Oneness Mountain that continuously expanded. Now that a spear had struck it again, the crack extended even more. There was a rumbling sound, which meant that the mountain could collapse. How did he dodge my attack? Emperor Charm pulled out the Starlight Tracking Spear and looked at Eastern Emperor Tai above in disbelief. Even the real Eastern Emperor Tai couldn't avoid the attack of the Starlight Tracking Spear. How did this fake dodge it so quickly? The moment Emperor Charm opened his mouth, Eastern Emperor Tai shook his finger at him and said lightly, "The mark can be moved away. Your starlight is just a mark." Emperor Charm stared at Eastern Emperor Tai with doubt. Suddenly, he raised the Starlight Tracking Spear and charged again. Crack! A second strike hit the Oneness Mountain. The third strike. The fourth strike. Emperor Charm had missed his target in 5 strikes in a row. What made it even worse was that Eastern Emperor Tai had the chance to counter him while he attacked, but the former had no intention to do so. Eastern Emperor Tai didn't make a move. In fact, he just let Emperor Charm stab into the mountain wall every time. Is the real Eastern Emperor Tai so powerful? Zen asked as he stared at the sky. Ha ha, we have lived for over 1,000 chaotic eras. We are much more experienced than the clones, Hui said. I guess my clone is going to be furious, said the shadow of Emperor Charm above Zen's head. Although these clones had different experiences from their owners, their tempers and personalities were the same. For example, Emperor Charm was a serious and stubborn man, and his clone in the source world was the same. Naturally, he couldn't stand someone tricking him in a battle. At the same time, the powerful warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace looked up and watched Eastern Emperor Tai constantly flash and dodge. All of them looked quite excited. After all, Emperor Charm had killed dozens of their peers. To say they hated him was an understatement. After 5 failed attacks in a row, Emperor Charm finally calmed down. Anger brewed in his dark eyes. He was on the verge of exploding with fury. On the contrary, Eastern Emperor Tai looked at him calmly. The real Eastern Emperor Tai had a good relationship with the real Emperor Charm in both the 77th Chaos and the other shore. Thus, he knew that the Emperor Charm in front of him was already quite enraged. Swoosh! After a moment of silence, Emperor Charm spread his wings and his body began to rapidly expand. It's the wild god body, Flamen said as her eyes narrowed into slits. In fact, by the end of ancient times, the embryos of the various super forces in the source world had already formed. At that time, there existed the 3 magnates of the ear-mouse race, the captain of the black ship, the yellow Thirk, the divine farmer, the snake goddess, Fuxi, Eastern Emperor Tai. Before the truth changed, these powerful warriors entered the land of bone tribulation on the other shore with their wild god bodies. There, they obtained the myriad tribulations bodies and subsequently improved their bodies. However, the cultivation of the wild gods had been prohibited since the Middle Ages, so the later generations weren't able to catch up with them. That was why even if there were many outstanding warriors born in the next generations, there was a natural defect in their physical bodies. The remedy to this defect was to absorb the chaotic source spirits, but the chaotic source spirits had their limits. Even if the younger warriors had reached the late stage of the chaotic source realm, their abilities were still much far from those of the people like Emperor Charm and Fuxi. More importantly, there were 2 conditions to enter stage 33. One was to enter the Soul City, and the other was to make it through the land of bone tribulation. Therefore, no matter how hard the masters like Athamar, Goran, Winchell, and Elizabeth worked, they couldn't enter stage 33. Of course, they couldn't become the most powerful masters like Emperor Charm and Eastern Emperor Tai. Among the people of the Oneness Sky Palace, only Yasmin and Eastern Emperor Tai had been to stage 33. Splash! Emperor Charm's body quickly expanded until he turned into a giant with wings and a height of 100,000 feet. He flapped his huge wings, and a hurricane formed. Stones, dust, and other debris flew and rolled around everywhere. "Are you serious?" Eastern Emperor Tai said with a faint smile. He also activated the wild god power and his body began to expand rapidly as well. In the blink of an eye, he also turned into a giant of 100,000 feet in size, standing not far away from Emperor Charm. He stretched out his hand and grabbed in the air as he said, "Grow." In turn, the purple rainbow sword grew bigger and bigger. Eastern Emperor Tai had forged the sword with a special material. It was originally 660,000 feet long, but after he forged it with a secret technique, he had shortened its length to 6 feet and 6 inches. Now, it had returned to its original size. At that point, Emperor Charm had completely lost his patience. His wings shook, and a scorching sun appeared behind him as he flew towards Eastern Emperor Tai. Eastern Emperor Tai slowly took a step back. The space around him quietly fluctuated, and he moved to a higher height. The war between the wild gods would easily hurt the innocent. He didn't want to involve Zen in the battle. After Emperor Charm missed his target, numerous blue squares emerged from his huge body, and he began to chase Eastern Emperor Tai. Just as he caught up to his opponent, a huge golden sword shadow appeared in the sky. The shadow was so big that it almost covered the dome above the Bloom Divine Province. Buzz! The shadow spun to the side and turned into dozens of golden swords. Then, those swords blocked the sky above the Bloom Divine Province. The tens of millions of creatures in the Bloom Divine Province were bathed in the golden light. As for Flamen, Elvenia, and the others in the Phoenix Palace, they all covered their mouths when they saw the scene. It turned out that those were the golden rune swords, which were activated by the bloodline power of Eastern Emperor Tai. In the past, when Eastern Emperor Tai had gone all out, he could only activate 3 golden rune swords at most. Even then, such a move was still quite powerful, and the other powerful warriors in the Source World were very afraid of it. But now, the number of golden rune swords in the sky was more than 10 times bigger. Chapter 3274, One Chance. Pierce, Auden and the others were shocked. They didn't know what the truth was. Slowly, a smile crept on their faces as they watched the golden sword radiance light up the sky. His Majesty has grown stronger on the other shore. Has His Majesty obtained another shore token that can strengthen the power of his bloodline? These are golden rune swords. This hasn't been used in ages, yet it's still incredibly powerful. Unbelievable. The Oneness Sky Palace was not a force made up of members from the same clan. Only those in the Phoenix Palace shared the same bloodline with Eastern Emperor Tai, which made his bloodline rare. Buzz! A huge vortex surrounded the golden rune swords, as though energy was constantly being drawn towards its center. Zen watched the vortex as though in a trance. "Master Hui, Emperor Charm," he suddenly said, "does that vortex connect somewhere outside the chaos?" Previously, Hui and Emperor Charm had said that the energy in the chaos actually didn't come from the chaos. However, the energy that was released was usually too little for people to find out this fact. In theory, if the energy was strong enough, a vortex would form, connecting to the outside of the chaos. Yet here it was, in the flesh. The power of the golden rune swords was extremely terrifying. "Exactly," Hui answered excitedly. "Master Hui, can your son's shooting bow destroy these golden rune swords?" Zen asked curiously. Well, Hui hesitated. Just then, Emperor Charm smiled bitterly and answered for him. "Nonsense. He was just lucky enough in the past to have shot down my sons." "Oh, I didn't expect the vortex would be so different from those in the suns," Zen muttered. "It's not like that," Emperor Charm said. "The energy has different types and comes from different sources. Thus, cutting off the different types of energy will require different methods. In other words, there are ways similar to the sun's shooting bow that could be used to suppress the energy." Zen raised his brow. Emperor Charm nodded. "Yes, among us, the one who has studied this the longest time is the primeval Lord of Heaven. However, despite his wisdom and the countless years he has spent on the research in this field, he's got nothing conclusive. Exploring things outside the chaos from within the chaos is like trying to peep at a leopard using a pipe," Hui said lazily. "It's guaranteed the results will be inaccurate." The primeval Lord of Heaven was known for his intelligence. Even the human powerhouses admired him for it. Yet, even a man as intelligent as him couldn't figure out the rules outside the chaos. Swoosh! Golden light pierced the air as the golden rune swords shot towards the sky. Once the swords connected with each other, a powerful aura surged forth and the bright golden light enveloped the world. This is the extreme intent of swordsmanship. His Majesty has indeed made a breakthrough. It's too powerful. Emperor Charm is definitely no match for him. Watching this beautiful scene unfold before them, the warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace were so giddy with excitement. On the other hand, the members of the Bearing race trembled in fear, their faces as pale as death. Emperor Charm was their only hope. If he didn't succeed, there was no way the warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace would let them go so easily. As if the warriors weren't troublesome enough, they also had to face the wrath of Eastern Emperor Tai. As the golden light flashed in the sky, suddenly, a huge red fireball appeared. It was another sun. Emperor Charm sighed bitterly. He had just used the 9-sun world destruction theurgy, so it was impossible for him to use it anytime soon. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect to face Eastern Emperor Tai, or that the fake who was controlling him would be so powerful. Emperor Charm was confident he knew Eastern Emperor Tai better than anyone else. Yet, he was perplexed. How could the power of these golden rune swords grow so rapidly? The soul curling up inside Eastern Emperor Tai's mind must be some kind of monster. Just as quickly as the new sun appeared, a strong sword radiance shot out towards it. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Emperor Charm was left with no choice but to use the grand teleportation technique. This time, the sword radiance pierced the sun, causing it to burst into flames that quickly sputtered out. However, the golden rune swords covered the sky above the Bloom Divine Province. No matter where Emperor Charm moved, a golden rune sword would follow. Under Eastern Emperor Tai's control, the golden rune swords picked up speed with every second that passed, but Emperor Charm was also able to teleport just as quickly. Buzz 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 buzz. Emperor Charm darted across the sky in a flash, disappearing into countless blue squares each time he teleported. Above the clear lake, the blue squares started to materialize. However, before Emperor Charm could even emerge, a golden light shot down from the sky, straight towards the blue squares. Reacting in a flash, Emperor Charm disappeared once more. Splash! The golden sword radiance pierced the surface of the water, causing ripples as large as a tsunami to sweep across the land. Fortunately, the big cities around the clear lake had powerful warriors. Together, they all took action to prevent the tidal wave from destroying their cities. These masters were not too worried about the damages they'd suffer from the tsunami. Rather, they anxiously looked to the sky as they watched streaks of golden light attack a blue figure. As the aborigines of the Bloom Divine Province, they could easily tell that the one who was attacking was Eastern Emperor Tai himself. As for the blue figure, very few could tell who he was. That didn't matter to them. What was most important was for Eastern Emperor Tai to win. At least, the Bloom Divine Province would ultimately be safe. Buzz. When Emperor Charm teleported away from the clear lake, he appeared on a plain in the west. But before he could even catch his breath, a golden rune sword slashed at him. Crack, 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 the blade of the golden rune sword slashed into the ground, and the earth erupted. In the blink of an eye, a canyon was created right next to Emperor Charm. Gritting his teeth angrily, Emperor Charm had no choice but to teleport again. Eastern Emperor Tai controlled the golden rune swords easily with his mind. If you were wise, you'd have escaped by now. But I know you won't run away. Eastern Emperor Tai smiled wickedly. You might have dodged my sword with the help of grand teleportation many times, but it's only a matter of time before you tire yourself out. As Eastern Emperor Tai spoke, countless small squares suddenly materialized behind him. Emperor Charm's eyes flashed with killing intent as he emerged, poised to land a sneak attack. However, Eastern Emperor Tai just laughed. A huge golden rune sword dashed towards them from the sky, threatening to pierce straight through Emperor Charm's head. Emperor Charm's face fell. Flapping his wings desperately, he managed to narrowly dodge the golden light. But at that moment, another golden rune sword came straight at him from behind. In a flash, Emperor Charm twisted his body to dodge that golden light by a hair. However, as soon as he recovered, another sword slashed towards him from the side. His expression darkened. There was no way he'd be able to dodge in time. He could only turn to protect his vital parts. Puff. Grunting, Emperor Charm realized the golden rune sword cut off one of his arms and half of his wing. His arm was more than 400,000 feet long, and his wing was 2 million feet long. When they were cut off, they returned to their normal sizes and fell from the sky. Blood spurted from his wounds, raining all over the Bloom Divine Province. Chapter 3275, Traitor. Emperor Charm's body trembled as he stared at his wounds. Eastern Emperor Tai still stood with his hands behind his back, an indescribable sadness washing over him. He had read through all the memories of his clone after taking his body. The two emperors had once been as close as brothers, but had turned against each other in the end. The thought of it made Eastern Emperor Tai sigh. Splash, splash, blood dripped down from Emperor Charm's body. Nobody dodged it, but instead looked up at the movements above them. You are no match for me, Eastern Emperor Tai said calmly. If he was up against the real Emperor Charm, he might not come out on top, but compared to his clone, Eastern Emperor Tai was much more capable in terms of control of the blood and combat. The corners of Emperor Charm's eyes twitched. He raised his hand and a huge flame began to condense into a long spear. He would not allow himself to fail, even if it cost him his life. But just as the enormous flame spear formed, a crack suddenly appeared between his eyebrows and an eyeball drilled through it. Come back, you really are no match for him, said Yellow Thirk. The eyeball allowed them to not only share the other shore tokens, but to observe and convey information to each other as well. When Emperor Charm and Eastern Emperor Tai fought, Yellow Thirk and Divine Farmer were watching. Not only are you no match for him, but even I would meet the same fate as you if I faced him, said Divine Farmer. Their tones were rife with caution. It seemed they regarded Eastern Emperor Tai as quite a formidable foe. Why? Emperor Charm was not convinced. He is not the real Eastern Emperor Tai. Why is he so powerful? He is indeed not the real Eastern Emperor Tai, but he might be another Eastern Emperor Tai, said Yellow Thirk. Another Eastern Emperor Tai? What do you mean? Emperor Charm asked as his heart sank. Zen was able to deactivate your 9-sun destruction Thurgy because someone called Hui gave him a bow. There is another me, another Divine Farmer, and another Emperor Charm in this world. What? This news surprised Emperor Charm. How could such people exist? He asked. Same as the people of the Pear Hill, Yellow Thirk and Divine Farmer had been searching for the human race on the other shore since their birth. However, the clues left by the human race on the other shore were all recorded in the 6-pattern blood-storing tree which was in the hands of the snake goddess. For this reason, Yellow Thirk and Divine Farmer knew much less about the human race on the other shore than the snake goddess did. The element spirit race in the upper stages had seen everything that the Moonfire slaves had seen, so they knew Zen had entered the creation myth temple and taken the civilization artifact. As the second ruling civilization, the element spirit race naturally knew the movements of the human race on the other shore. To them, the so-called secrets were not secrets at all. But they had never revealed any information to Yellow Thirk and Divine Farmer. The reason was very simple. They supported Yellow Thirk and Divine Farmer because they wished to fragment the human race. So how could they tell them the history of the human race on the other shore? Yellow Thirk had just been to the other shore. It was not until he asked about Zen's sun shooting bow that the element spirit race told him the secrets they knew. Now that they had reached this point, the element spirit race had complete control of them, leaving them no right to turn back. But the truth shocked him and he immediately confessed it to Emperor Charm. So I'm just a clone? Emperor Charm murmured. Eastern Emperor Tai still looked at him calmly. After Emperor Charm had turned into a wild god, his body had become colossal. Although he murmured low and soft, Eastern Emperor Tai heard him clearly. Since Emperor Charm now knew he was a clone, he might have known some of the truth. Emperor Charm lowered his head and thought a while before dissipating the wild god power. His gigantic body shrunk back to its normal size. Eastern Emperor Tai stared at the small-sized Emperor Charm and dissipated his wild god power as well. You are the real Eastern Emperor Tai, right? Emperor Charm asked, disheartened. Eastern Emperor Tai nodded and said, yes. Emperor Charm looked down at the Oneness Mountain and said, I want to see my real self. This sudden request surprised Eastern Emperor Tai, but he didn't hesitate and quickly replied, okay. The two came back one after another. The powerful warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace had no idea what they were up to, but seeing Emperor Charm making his way back made them nervous. Among the warriors, only a few could still fight. Libby was one of them. As Emperor Charm came back, they stepped forward and surrounded him in case he decided to attack suddenly. Zen, he wishes to see his real self, said Eastern Emperor Tai through his life vitality. Zen was astonished. He hesitated a moment and the real Emperor Charm said in his mind, let me meet him. I can talk to him. Zen nodded in approval. Eastern Emperor Tai stood beside him while Emperor Charm, who had lost an arm and a wing, stood opposite Zen. Buzz. A faint light flashed and the shadow of the real Emperor Charm appeared above Zen's head. After staring at his real self for a while, Emperor Charm finally brought himself to ask, they say I'm your clone. Is it true? It's true, replied the real Emperor Charm. Why did you create me? Emperor Charm asked. We want you to make the last attempt to complete the finale way, the real Emperor Charm said. Is that also why you created Divine Farmer and Yellow Thirk? Emperor Charm asked. That's correct. In fact, we have sowed many seeds, but most of them haven't survived. You are one of the lucky few, so are Yellow Thirk and Divine Farmer, the real Emperor Charm said with a smile. I can ask their energy souls to show up. No need. Emperor Charm waved his hand and continued, but why are we on different paths? Why don't we follow the same path as Eastern Emperor Tai, the snake goddess and Fuxi? Emperor Charm felt wronged. Finding out he was a traitor hurt his heart and filled him with regret. But he had betrayed them unintentionally, so he blamed his real self for it. The real Emperor Charm sighed and said, it didn't all go according to plan. The element spirit race intervened, and we were trapped in stage 33. We could do nothing to help. It was not until Zen opened the creation myth temple and bore the civilization artifact that our energy souls were released. Oh, I see, I took the wrong path, Emperor Charm said, lowering his eyes. Then I can choose another path. While Emperor Charm asked these questions in the presence of Zen, Yellow Thirk and Divine Farmer listened intently in another area of the source world. When they heard Emperor Charm say that he would choose another path, their demeanor shifted drastically. Dang it, the element spirit race had told them the truth because they were sure they would not dare to betray them. Betraying them now, at this critical moment, would lead to unimaginable consequences. Chapter 3276, Explosion. Zen, Flamen, and the others were stunned. Emperor Charm was powerful, and with this power came extreme determination and a strong will. Once he chose a path, he would doggedly stick to it even if he was wrong. But just a few words from the real Emperor Charm pushed him to change his mind. The real Emperor Charm was not surprised and remained calm as usual. Emperor Charm and the real Emperor Charm had similar personalities. The real Emperor Charm knew that his duplicate couldn't accept deception and betrayal. Emperor Charm's duplicate had once been the king of the Sun Crow race, and hadn't considered his behaviors as betrayal. But things changed after the duplicate had discovered his identity. At the time, Emperor Charm's duplicate had argued with Eastern Emperor Tai's duplicate about which path they should choose. And now that he had finally proved his fault, he wasn't about to accept anything else. Of course, you can choose another path if you want, the real Emperor Charm said. Emperor Charm nodded. He was still interested in the bloodline power of the Sun Crow race. He also wanted to know what the human race and the real Emperor Charm were like in the past. But Emperor Charm had just nodded when the eyeball on his forehead suddenly flashed a triangular black light, and a strange cry rang out from it. What's the point if you're willing to do that? You should also ask if we are willing to let you do it. Emperor Charm looked worried at these words. Who are you? He stammered. The element spirit race had given this eyeball to Emperor Charm. But for a long time, Emperor Charm had always used it to communicate with the Yellow Thirk, the Divine Farmer and Mahoney, or to borrow other shore tokens from them. But this scream was from none of them. Who am I? Ha ha. The voice laughed but did not answer. I know who you are. A figure appeared above Zen's head once again. It was none other than the primeval Lord of Heaven. When Zen had asked the energy souls of Emperor Charm, Hui, and Eastern Emperor Tai for help, the primeval Lord of Heaven had begun to pay attention to the outside world. The primeval Lord of Heaven had finally chosen to show up when the voice of the eyeball had sounded. The triangular black light in the eyeball stared at the primeval Lord of Heaven's energy soul, and its laughter became even more arrogant. Nice to meet you again. Tell me, do you want to stir up trouble just by relying on this strand of energy soul? The primeval Lord of Heaven stared calmly at the triangular black light in the eyeball and said, I have obtained the opportunity. Really? In that case, why are you hiding in stage 33 of the other shore? You are inferior even to the Nihility race. The triangular black light continued to taunt him. Every race on the other shore that believed in the finale way were suppressed. They either disappeared from the other shore, or joined the element spirit race. Even the human race, which had been extremely powerful for a period of time, had been trapped within stage 33 of the other shore. Only the Nihility race was an exception. The path of cultivation that this race had chosen was completely different from that of the element spirit race. But before the element spirit race could begin to suppress them, the Nihility race had successfully attracted many talents and powerful warriors from many large races. It had grown to an extent that the element spirit race had found it really difficult to suppress it. Your plan is unfortunately a little too late, the primeval Lord of Heaven said with a smile. You don't have an advantage in the chaos. This advantage is nothing for our element spirit race. Perhaps the voice wanted to prove that it didn't care. The eyeball began to suddenly blink. Buzz. The eyeball turned red, a terrifying energy brewing within it. Eastern Emperor Tai stood beside them and noted Emperor Charm's every movement. He was afraid that Emperor Charm would kill people and cause trouble. When the energy began to spread, he transported himself so he was standing before Zen in a flash. In the meantime, Emperor Charm had also guessed that something was up. He turned to look at his subordinates and then glanced at the real Emperor Charm, saying, "This man is the real Emperor Charm. I'm just a clone. Perhaps this is why you betrayed me. I'm willing to believe it, but please follow and support him." As he spoke, small blue squares appeared around his body, and he appeared in the sky. "Flamen, please forgive me," Emperor Charm said, looking down at Flamen. Flamen had Sun Crow race's bloodline flowing in her veins. When she had married Eastern Emperor Tai, Emperor Charm had obviously agreed. But Flamen had been the one to cause the conflict between the two races at the beginning, and she was considered to be a traitor in the entire divine lair. Bang! Before Emperor Charm could finish speaking, the red eyeball exploded. Emperor Charm had soared into the sky because he didn't want to hurt Zen, Flamen, and the others. But although the eyeball was strong, the shock wave did not cover a large area. The explosion only caused Emperor Charm's head and the upper part of his body to shatter into pieces, causing the lower part of his body to fall from the sky. Emperor Charm. The members of the Sun Crow race were heartbroken at this development. Elizabeth flapped her wings and flew upwards, catching Emperor Charm's broken body in her arms. The Sun Crow race needed to listen to Emperor Charm in Zen's mind because of the bloodline worship, but their memories and emotions were still there. This kind of grief bubbled up from the depths of their hearts. Flamen bit her lips, her face lined with sorrow. Elvinia didn't share a good relationship with Emperor Charm. The Oneness Sky Palace and the Sun Crow race had turned into enemies even before she was born. She detested the winged demon women of the divine lair. But her mood soured when she sensed Flamen's sadness. It was truly pitiful for a leader of a super force to die in this way. The moment Emperor Charm died, everyone's eyes fell back on Hancock and his companions. Hancock and his companions had wanted to escape in the beginning. But after Emperor Charm had launched an attack on the Bloom Divine Province, they had become unwilling to leave. When all the powerful warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace were killed, they would be able to search and snatch any treasures on the Seven Mountains. A super force had a very deep foundation and abundant resources after all. It never occurred to them that Emperor Charm could be no match for Eastern Emperor Tai. In this moment, they were thinking about whether Emperor Charm could run away along with them. With Emperor Charm's strength and his control of the space theurgy, it would be easy for him to do it. But they hadn't expected Emperor Charm to suddenly stop fighting and start a chat with them. Moments after, Emperor Charm even soared into the air and exploded. Hancock and the others were stunned and at this point, found it impossible to escape. The moment the eyeball on Emperor Charm's forehead exploded, a violent vibration was transmitted to the foreheads of the Yellow Theurk, the Divine Farmer, and Mahoney in a different place in the Source World. They frantically tried to sense Emperor Charm's eyeball, but the other side had fallen into darkness. Chapter 3277, The Minimum Spaces. Yellow Theurk, Divine Farmer and Mahoney looked at each other in silence. They had expected the Element Spirit race to punish Emperor Charm, but they hadn't expected it to be done by such violent means. He had only exhibited a smidgen of rebellion. He hadn't even rebelled yet, and still they killed him without hesitation. They were a truly cruel race. There was also an eyeball buried into each of their foreheads. They had once thought that this other shore token would bring endless possibilities. With more other shore tokens, they would be able to enhance each other's strength far beyond what was previously possible. But now, all it seemed to be was a fatal tool to be used against them. How could such powerful masters as Yellow Theurk and Divine Farmer allow someone else to have such control over their lives? Taking their lives at any moment? Even the superior element spirit race should not be allowed that power. As they stood silently, the eyeballs on their foreheads opened. A triangular black light appeared from the center of the eyeballs, and the voice could be heard again. "Have you seen the fate Emperor Charm has met?" the triangular black light asked. "Yes," replied Yellow Theurk. "Do you have any feelings about this?" the triangular black light continued. Yellow Theurk's eyes grew stern as he said, "We have already chosen our own path, and we will not stray from it. Emperor Charm made his choice to rebel. We do not need such a foolish ally." The triangular black light trembled for a moment before saying, "That's right. Remember, this world will eventually prove that the path we have chosen is indeed the right one. The purge way is the only way to survive. I don't want to see this happen again. You have seen his ending." Once it had finished speaking, the triangular black light vanished immediately. Yellow Theurk, Mahoney and Divine Farmer all remained silent. The strong warriors following behind them were silent as well. Their leaders' lives were in someone else's hands. All it would take was an order to be given and they would be dead. This thought dragged their spirits down. But the eyeballs remained rooted in their foreheads, and so even a private conversation was out of the question. After a short silence, Yellow Thirk turned to Fire Emissary, one of the 5 element emissaries, and said, "Go ahead with your work." Fire Emissary looked at Yellow Thirk worriedly but nodded nonetheless. He stretched out his arm and made a lifting gesture in the air, and wisps of cyan flames rose from his hands. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. The flames rose up and were sucked into the space above, like vortexes swirling and converging into a single point. The space of the chaos had the smallest unit. If a space was constantly divided, the smallest space would be formed. This method was exclusive to the chaos ancient god, Othniel. Fire Emissary now began condensing all the flames into this minimum space. An hour later, the flames in the minimum space had finally reached a critical state. No matter how hard Fire Emissary tried, he couldn't compress any more flames into it. "It's done," Fire Emissary said to Yellow Thirk. Yellow Thirk nodded at the huge eye in the crack of the abyss, and the minimum space slowly rose up. Above the pitch-black abyss, there were over 100 of such minimum spaces. They were incredibly small, so small that the tip of a hair could hold over 1,000,000 of them. However, the sheer number of flames in them made the minimum spaces very conspicuous, especially in the darkness where the cyan dots of light were like dazzling stars. "Are the concentrated flames really that powerful?" Fire Emissary asked. Yellow Thirk smiled faintly and said, "You may have a try if you wish." "Okay." Fire Emissary was already very curious and so jumped at this opportunity. He stretched out his hand, picked a cyan light dot from the air and pinched it hard. Splash! The minimum space exploded. It had already been filled to the limit with flames. If it weren't for the chaos ancient god named Othniel who had controlled it personally, the minimum space would have collapsed. Othniel could achieve a wonderful balance in this minimum space. The moment it exploded, the cyan flames spread out and plummeted down from the sky. When they reached the bottom of the abyss, they rose upwards once more. The abyss was so big that it could accommodate a large province, and yet it was instantly enveloped by flames. "That fire is incredibly fierce," Fire Emissary exclaimed, staring at the flames above. "But I think there are too many flames in it. The entire space exploded with your flames." "That space itself turned into a part of the flames," Yellow Thirk explained. "Is that little space so powerful?" Fire Emissary asked, totally stunned. "Yes, the mechanism is very complicated and difficult to explain. All you need to know is that all materials in the chaos are made up of countless minimum spaces. No matter how the chaos is destroyed or reborn, these minimum spaces have always been here. Ordinary people can't usually use these minimum spaces." Divine Farmer reached out his hand to touch the flames around him. "The power of the flames is not very strong, but they are destructive enough to kill all the creatures in a province." Those flames had already filled the huge abyss. Such powerful flames wouldn't cause any harm to people like Divine Farmer and Yellow Thirk, but if they were placed in a large province, the creatures there would suffer. If a minimum space exploded, a large province, as well as tens of millions of creatures there, would be burnt to ashes. "How many provinces should I burn to make the source world react?" Fire Emissary asked, frowning intently as he appeared to try and work it out himself. Human nature was complicated. Fire Emissary was a ruthless figure in the bearing race and countless people had died by his hands. But even burning the provinces and killing all the creatures like this gave him a reason for pause. "According to my calculations, we will have to burn down at least 300 provinces," Divine Farmer replied flatly. Everyone fell silent again on hearing this. The fact that the element spirit race had killed Emperor Charm already aroused feelings of rebellion within them. The previous plans seemed logical until they carried them out. Then they felt like stopping and wanted to give up. "I'll go first," Mahoney said, taking the initiative while everyone else remained silent. Among the several super forces, the New Moon race was the smallest. In the past, they were not qualified to be ranked as a super force. They developed to this point with the support of the Bearing race and the Divine Farmer race. At this crucial moment, Mahoney felt obligated to do something. After the cyan flames that spread throughout the abyss disappeared, she flew up and stored the minimum spaces in her space ring. She then moved out of the abyss and Fire Emissary continued to compress the flames into the minimum spaces. The vast sea province was on the other side of the abyss. Chapter 3278, Fast Destruction. Soon after, Mahoney arrived above the vast sea province and released a minimum space from her space ring. The minimum space was almost weightless and so small that to the eye and touch it was almost nothing. If an ordinary person were to touch it, it would pass straight through their bodies. Because of this, it was only through her space thurgies that Mahoney could move these minimum spaces. After she released one, it floated slowly in the air. With a gentle breeze, the minimum space, which was 1,000,000 times smaller than dust, spiraled in the air and floated downwards. The sun shone in the vast sea province, so it was definitely not as dark as the abyss. With the sunlight beaming, even if the minimum space emitted light, it was nowhere near as dazzling as the star and would be a little more inconspicuous. It continued floating down gently before making its way down to an island below. The vast sea province was almost completely covered in water, with only a few large islands present on the surface. On the island below, there lived a small race called the foxfish race. Their race's power was ranked high in the vast sea province. But even if they were ranked in the top 10 in the vast sea province, it was still a very small and insignificant race when compared to the superpowers in the source world. Any master from the Bering race or the divine farmer race would be capable of destroying such a puny race. However, as the vast sea province was relatively remote, and there was no unique production, it had always been peaceful. Except for the two great races fighting underwater from time to time, peace was maintained. Such a harmonious state was rarely seen in the source world. "Look over there. What's that?" a member of the foxfish race said as he had noticed the dot of light falling from the sky. Many of the foxfish race then looked up curiously. "Is there a star falling? It's daytime. Let's go and have a look." They had no idea of the impending doom and still chased after the dot of light. One of them was faster than the rest. He had reached the consummation of true God realm. He constantly flashed his figure and got below the light first. What a small dot of light! But it's so bright that it can be seen dozens of miles away. "What sort of treasure is this?" he exclaimed, reaching out to touch the light still gliding down. The moment he came into contact with this minimum space, it penetrated right through his hand and fell to the ground, going further down deep into the earth below his feet. What the? He was a little confused. Was that light actually real? Naturally, there was no way for him to understand how small the minimum space was. Compared with the minimum space, his body was like a rough sieve through which the space could just pass straight. As he pondered on the dot of light, he felt a heat rising from beneath his feet. Whoosh! A cyan flame burst from the ground and soared into the sky. The other members of the foxfish race standing in the distance saw the soaring column of fire and their faces filled with horror. They all turned to run the other way, spurred on by their absolute terror. But the cyan flame was spreading too fast. Before they could turn, the cyan fire column had caught up to them, engulfing their bodies instantly. It was as Divine Farmer had said. The flame released from the minimum space was not very powerful and wouldn't cause any harm to the masters at the chaotic source realm or warriors at the other shore realm. However, 99.9% of creatures in the source world were unable to resist it. As the cyan flames continued to spread rapidly, the members of the foxfish race screamed, roared, and cried with despair as most of them were burnt to ashes in seconds. Everything, including the trees and buildings, was set on fire. The foxfish at the consummation of true God realm laid an enchanted barrier against the flames rising from below, but it could only hold off the fire for a few seconds. He swiftly switched to trying to use the grand teleportation to avoid the cyan flames. But just as he had teleported to a position he thought was safe, the flames had already spread and enveloped him once again. He used the grand teleportation again, but was still caught by the fast-spreading cyan flames. When he finally reached the sea surface, he found that the cyan flames seemed to have covered the entire vast sea province. Splash! He leapt into the sea. It wasn't long before the sea water began to boil. But compared to the burning of the flames, he considered the water cool. At the very least, he could endure the heat of the boiling much easier. He soon found, however, that even the bottom of the sea was not safe. The cyan flames had spread to fill the entire vast sea province. Even the seawater began steaming intensely under the frenzied burning of the flames, and the sea level began falling at a visible rate. The large races at the bottom of the sea then fell into panic as well. They didn't know where the flames had come from, but at the rate the water steamed and evaporated, it wouldn't be long before the seawater completely disappeared, and their fate would be no different from that of the creatures on the island. What unfolded before their eyes was completely beyond their knowledge and expectations. They couldn't understand why someone would kill the others and destroy everything for no reason. As the flames continued to roll in the air, all the seawater in the vast sea province was totally evaporated. Floating high above in midair, Mahoney looked down indifferently. Once the seawater had evaporated, the boundless salt was released. The salt and the black charcoal mixed together, forming an endless black salt land. Puff! The flames in the minimum space finally burnt out. The flaming vast sea province finally regained some semblance of coolness. Only a minute number of creatures survived. Some of them were powerful warriors at the other shore realm who had special other shore tokens, and 2 were powerful warriors at the chaotic source realm, sitting at the bottom of the sea. Not long ago, these 2 supreme elders had been the strongest warriors of 2 races in the vast sea province. They had fought for a resource for tens of thousands of years, and the 2 of them had always been at the forefront of the battle. They hadn't expected that they could lose everything they possessed so quickly. The sea water had been evaporated and their clansmen burned to a crisp. They were left with nothing. The 2 of them looked at each other speechlessly, with awe, horror and hopelessness in their eyes. Even though they were powerful warriors at the chaotic source realm, they could do nothing about that fire except protect themselves. Tens of billions of creatures died in fear and anger right in front of them, as they watched. Negative emotions could be infectious. One person's negative emotions could be passed to a group, and that group could do the same to the world. The negative emotions of tens of billions of creatures were like an invisible hammer that slammed down and began to shake the entire source world. Swoosh! Even Mahoney seemed to be affected by it. She took a deep breath before darting off towards the province next to the vast sea province. Chapter 3279, Pushing the Mountain. The dreary battle between the Oneness Sky Palace and the Sun Crow race had finally come to an end. Since the real Eastern Emperor Tai showed up, the remaining members of the Bering race were either captured or killed in the battle. Strictly speaking, the Sun Crow race didn't suffer a heavy loss. However, in exchange for that, they had lost Emperor Charm. Most of the elite warriors of the Sun Crow race, including most members of the Divine Lair and Emperor Charm's royal guards, survived the battle. During the war, when Emperor Charm was still alive, Elizabeth, Micah, and their other colleagues had undergone fierce mental struggles. When Zen ordered them to attack their emperor, there were a lot of contradictory feelings that couldn't be pushed aside. Likewise, because they were his loyal subordinates, Emperor Charm wasn't able to fully harm them. Now that Emperor Charm was no more, it meant that the core of the Sun Crow race had disappeared, and they had no other choice but to follow Zen with all their hearts. Also, after defeating Emperor Charm, the energy soul of the real Eastern Emperor Tai gave up the body out of his own accord. By then, Flamen, Pierce, and the others had already realized that the Eastern Emperor Tai that they knew was still in slumber, and there was someone else who occupied his body. This person was none other than the real Eastern Emperor Tai that was inside Zen. Considering the troubled times, I must say that the real Eastern Emperor Tai can still stay in his body since the current one hasn't returned from the other shore yet, Pierce suggested in Pierce's mind. The most important thing at present was to ensure the safety of the Oneness Sky Palace. If there came another being that was as powerful as Emperor Charm and attacked them at their chaotic state, he knew that they might not be able to last. In the meantime, the real Eastern Emperor Tai had already returned to Zen's inner world and entered the civilization artifact. Zen served as a mediator to deliver him Pierce's message. After a while, Zen received Eastern Emperor Tai's response and a slight frown became visible on his face. He refuses. He says that if the Oneness Sky Palace was in danger again, he would definitely help with all his might. However, he doesn't want to stay in his body if it isn't necessary. Really, I heard that all the creatures on the other shore are reluctant to leave the chaos. Why would he refuse to stay? Pierce asked curiously. Since he had been working for Eastern Emperor Tai for so long, Pierce was quite knowledgeable of the situation. Those creatures that had been born in the chaos and then later entered the other shore, all missed their past old lives in the chaos because they were already trapped on the other shore. Some other shore creatures were even willing to be carried and become other people's other shore tokens so that they could have a chance to cross and see the chaos again. However, the real Eastern Emperor Tai seemed to be unwilling to experience that. Maybe it's because he knows that this is just a temporary matter. He may be afraid that he can't give it up later. Auden chimed in and gave his opinion. Most of the powerful warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace who managed to survive were all seriously injured. Fortunately, due to their high cultivation level, recovery would be a sure thing. That was why Auden, who also took severe damage during the earlier battle, looked much better now. Oh, at least someone understands. Hui suddenly appeared and commented on Auden's remark. We have been locked in the Dark Temple for countless years, motionless as a statue. We have lived without any desire, any greed or anything. Yes, it is so exciting to be able to come back to this world and experience the previous life. And that exactly is the main reason why he will be reluctant to leave later. So, he made the right choice. Hui explained. He saw everyone staring at him in a daze. And yeah, I'm leaving too, he exclaimed. Whoosh, in the blink of an eye, he returned to Zen's inner world too. Zen, who was that man? Pierce couldn't help but ask. Now they understood that none of the people residing within Zen's body was ordinary, especially the old man that just appeared suddenly and talked directly to the element spirit race. That was Hui. I borrowed his bow to extinguish Emperor Charm's sons. Zen explained that the bow and arrows he had used to shoot down Emperor Charm's sons were from Hui. Pierce and the others present were all amazed by the story. They had never imagined that humans had once possessed such tremendous abilities. At the same time, Libby was helping others treat their wounds in a nearby place. Naturally, she heard all the tales told by Zen. A trace of sulk appeared on her delicate and pretty face. In this war, all her pride turned into dust. This man, who had advanced so much faster than her, had turned the tide of the entire war all by himself. He had relied on his own abilities to suppress and defeat the Sun Crow race. He put under his control the corpse spirit Sun Crows and the members of the Sun Crow race, and ultimately defeated Emperor Charm to end the war. With that said, everyone else in the Oneness Sky Palace just acted the supporting role. As for Libby, it was already a great performance from her to be able to help and support Athomar and Goran in their battles. Boom, boom, boom. While Libby was lost in thought, sounds of explosions were heard coming from inside the Oneness Mountain. During the fierce battle between Eastern Emperor Tai and Emperor Charm, the center part of the Oneness Mountain had been riddled with huge holes. Moreover, this part was the weakest point of the mountain. As the mountain couldn't bear the pressure from the upper area, the inner part gradually collapsed, and it began to slowly crumble. The Oneness Mountain is collapsing. Someone immediately shouted. If the upper part of the mountain fell, Dragon City, which was at the foot of the mountain, would be completely crushed to nothingness. Although the Dragon City had already been in ruins, thanks to the members of the Bearing race, it was not completely destroyed. It could still be salvaged and be brought back to its original state. However, if the Oneness Mountain smashed it down, there would be nothing left to rebuild. Boom, crash. Upon seeing that the mountain was continuously tilting sideward, Zen immediately directed his order to the Sun Crow race, hold back the Oneness Mountain. As soon as they heard the order, the members of the Sun Crow race appeared on the side of the upper part of the Oneness Mountain in a flash. Crack, crack, crack. The combined strength unleashed by several powerful warriors of the Sun Crow race couldn't be underestimated. Also, some of the powerful warriors of the Oneness Sky Palace that had already recovered rushed forward to help the members of the Sun Crow race. However, even with the combined efforts of the two groups, it wasn't enough to stop the sliding of the upper part of the Oneness Mountain. The mountain was just too huge. Compared to it, their bodies were like insects who were trying to push off an enormous boulder. When they exerted their forces and pushed the mountain wall, the soft surface of the mountain began to crumble. As a result, they sank into it. When the members of the Sun Crow race found this problem, they spread out their wings and tried to increase the surface area of their contact against the mountain. However, this tactic still failed and they also sank into it. In this kind of situation, it would be easier if the real Eastern Emperor Tai used his wild god power. However, since the real Eastern Emperor Tai had already returned into Zen's inner world, it was not appropriate to call him right away. As Zen perceived that the situation was getting out of hand, he also dashed and appeared on the side of the mountain. There's no other choice. Wild god body. In the blink of an eye, Zen turned into a colossal giant, and started pushing the falling part of the mountain with his entire body. Chapter 3280, Eternal Warriors. Even though Zen was an extraordinarily powerful warrior, he couldn't stop the mountain from sliding down. He could only slow it down a bit. Libby refused to sit back and watch this happen. Planting her feet firmly into the ground, she leapt and flew towards the sliding mountain in an attempt to block it. However, she ended up drilling right through it, failing even to slow it down. When she had burst out from the mountain, suddenly, an idea crossed her mind. Master Athomar, use the lofty sword. The lofty sword itself was massive. Athomar turned to look at her when she called him, and upon hearing her words, he nodded in understanding. Without hesitation, Athomar started to recite the spell. Then, multiple rings of light appeared in the air, and from the center of these huge rings, the lofty swords shot out. In a flash, the huge lofty swords planted themselves firmly onto the side of the mountain. Elizabeth, Libby, and the others pressed themselves against the lofty swords, trying to push the mountain backward. Athomar made sure to distribute the lofty swords around the mountain evenly, and wherever he looked, a strong warrior had gotten a hold of the lofty swords to push back the mountain. Thanks to this newfound strategy, the collapsing of the upper half of the mountain slowed to a halt. At this time, Pierce finally gathered enough strength to speak. Auden, you take Athamar and the others to cast the arrays. First, we must fix the mountain body. Auden nodded and flew to Athamar to relay his orders. Immediately, they began to set up arrays in the area where the mountain initially broke. It was no easy task to build arrays that would fix such a massive mountain. Even though these arrays were just enough to make a temporary fix, it took them almost 2 hours. As they worked on the arrays, Elizabeth and the others kept on pushing the mountain to keep it from sliding. This exhausted a considerable amount of divine crystals, yet they knew they had no choice but to use the power of their other shore tokens. 2 hours later, the arrays were activated, finally stabilizing the mountain. At the sight of this, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. When Zen saw that the mountain had settled down, he deactivated his wild god body and descended to join the others. Once he landed, Pierce stared at him strangely. It was no secret in the Oneness Sky Palace that Zen had cultivated the wild god body. Actually, even in this era, it wasn't too out of the ordinary to cultivate the wild god body. While wild bones were indeed exhausted, that didn't mean that the super forces hadn't collected any of them from the past. In fact, their stocks were enough to allow a small number of people to cultivate the wild god body. However, the reason why Pierce looked at Zen dubiously was because wild gods weren't supposed to be able to enter the other shore. Additionally, it was difficult for them to obtain more than 1 divine megaton of force, so it was practically useless to focus on cultivating the wild god body. However, Zen was different. Not only was he strong in a wild god body, but he was also able to enter the other shore. This made Pierce finally realize another pressing problem. Zen, you really have made rapid progress in such a short period of time after you came to the Oneness Sky Palace, Pierce suddenly said. Zen cast a confused look at Pierce, unsure of the latter's intentions. Nodding modestly, he answered simply, I'm flattered. Pierce shook his head. I know your physical body can enter the other shore, and naturally you will have great potential in the future. But more than a year ago, you were still in stage 13 of the Lust World. And that was too far from the upper stages. I didn't expect you to step into the Desire World so soon. Pierce paused, his gaze fixed on Zen. Besides, your soul is extremely stable. You have already reached the ultimate level of the Indigo Soul, right? Zen nodded. It wasn't difficult for him to reach the ultimate level of the Indigo Soul. In fact, he was even able to help others reach this level. After the ancient times, countless people have reached the ultimate level of the Indigo Soul, Pierce continued indifferently. But not a single one of them got the myriad tribulations body. So, since then, no one has stood a chance to enter stage 33. After ancient times, no one has entered stage 33. Zen echoed in surprise. Yes, there are 2 conditions for one to enter stage 33. First, to transcend the ultimate level of the Indigo Soul to become a holy soul. Second, to own the myriad tribulations body. After meeting these 2 conditions, one will be able to enter the eternal scroll painting in stage 32 and then get up to stage 33, the 3 purities stage. Pierce said excitedly, his eyes flashing with a hint of yearning. He, Auden, and Athamar had all reached the Holy Soul realm. But because they couldn't get the myriad tribulations body, they failed to enter the eternal scroll painting. Naturally, this meant they couldn't proceed to stage 33. They were forced to limit their cultivation to stage 32, which was fruitless. This was their biggest regret. Not far away, Micah and Baggett had been listening. The 2 exchanged helpless looks as they heard what Pierce was saying. They were by no means weak, but because of the other shore rules, they too were doomed to share the same fate. Eternal scroll painting? Zen asked, his heartbeat quickening. Yes, it's a huge scroll painting floating in the air in stage 32, with all sorts of powerful creatures drawn in it. The masters who enter the eternal scroll painting are called eternal warriors, or eternal beings, Pierce smiled. He was pleased to answer Zen's question. Is Eastern Emperor Tai also an eternal warrior? Zen asked, raising his eyebrow curiously. Yes, Pierce answered. Only 2 people from the Oneness Sky Palace are eternal warriors, Eastern Emperor Tai and Madame Yasmin. So, naturally, their strength is higher than that of the other 5 mountain leaders. After the battle between the Oneness Sky Palace and the Sun Crow race, Zen had gotten a general understanding of these people's strength. Previously, he was under the impression that the gap between the other mountain leaders and Eastern Emperor Tai wasn't that big. However, now he realized that he had been wrong. While they were only 1 stage apart in cultivation level, the disparity in strength was extreme. Your soul and body are qualified. I hope you can enter the Soul City as soon as possible and pass the land of bone tribulation, and become an eternal warrior, said Pierce, looking at Eastern Emperor Tai who was sitting on the ground. Maybe you can go to stage 33 to save Eastern Emperor Tai, he said softly. If I'm qualified to become an eternal warrior just because my physical body can enter the other shore, Zen said, what about Elvinia? As he spoke, he looked at Elvinia, who was standing nearby. Elvinia's situation was a little out of the ordinary. Her own physical body did not enter the other shore, but her purified being's body did. Pierce smiled. Maybe. After all, the test of the eternal scroll painting is on the other shore. Theoretically, anyone who passes it can enter stage 33, but I can't be completely sure. Elvinia's case was so different, even Eastern Emperor Tai could not be sure. I will definitely be an eternal warrior, Elvinia suddenly said determinedly. I want to save Father. Pierce looked at her dotingly, his wrinkled face full of fondness. I believe you will do it. Elvinia cast a glance at Zen. She knew in her heart that the key to become the eternal warrior was still him. Under the gaze of Elvinia, Zen looked a little uneasy. He glanced at the Oneness Mountain that had been stabilized and suddenly said, I need to go back to the Flow Sword sect. Although it was unlikely that the Bearing race would go to the three sword sects, Zen was worried. Now that the war in the Oneness Sky Palace had been settled, it was time for him to go back to check on his family. The moment he finished speaking, he stretched his arms and launched himself into the sky. During the battle, the Bearing race had destroyed the arrays that had been set up along the mountain. Because of this, Zen didn't need to climb the mountain anymore, he just flew straight to the top.